Hello, everyone. We're back again after a staggeringly long hiatus, and it's good to be able to share this stream with you. You're also sharing it with 10,000 cicadas, which here in Auckland are making as much of a racket as they can before they get their end away and then expire after 2 weeks. So anyway, let's get the guests on. In early November, my first guest drove amid southern Illinois' rolling hills and forests, the trees ablaze with fall reds, oranges, and golds, harvest season having wound down, leaving fields of corn and soybeans bare, and small towns gearing up for Thanksgiving with cozy festivals and craft fairs. He parked and went inside a community center, ready to perform his civic duty, in keeping with the time-honored verities of democracy. Looked at the options, and although he had already made up his mind, the stark and dispiriting reality of the choice left him wavering for a second, glaring mordantly into a middle distance, confounded that things had come to this. Nevertheless, he daubed his paper in black ink, stashed it in the ballot box, and left. And yet, having returned to his car, he paused again, one hand on the ignition, contending with his decision. On the freeway, he winced and sighed tersely, and eventually, back home, lay staring at the ceiling like Llewellyn Moss in No Country for Old Men, finally murmuring, No, it ain't right. Despite pressing domestic obligations, he got back in the car and returned to the community center. He slipped into the polling booth, thinking a discreet rummage and a few quick dabs and scrollings would rectify a momentary lapse of reason. But he was impeded by an enormous black woman with a weave in her hair, wearing a lanyard, who raised a deterring palm and said, Sir, I'm going to need you to step away from the ballot box. To which my guest urged, But I've made a terrible mistake. If you'll just let me... Sir, I need you to leave, the woman insisted. Otherwise, we're going to have a problem here. My guest, in his exasperation, growled, God damn it, scowled and flounced out again, and minutes later, having ducked into a 7-Eleven, he stood by the roadside taking long drags from a cigarette. The roadside he now saw was a dull stretch of cracked asphalt, slick with the oily sheen of past rains and the dampness of a coming storm he saw in a slanting fume in the distance. The fields on either side stripped bare, nothing but brittle cornstalk stubble jutting from the mud. The sky hung low and heavy over a featureless sprawl, a rusting road sign, its letters peeling and pockmarked with buckshot, rattled against its post. When a rated 6 truck rumbled past, the bluster in its wake stirred up the cracked lid of a discarded fast food cup, which in a spindrift of dust and grit twirled in a half circle, then twitched into stillness as the rain began to fall, fat, cold splatters that darkened the ground. My first guest brushed his thumb against his forehead, then stamped out the cigarette. He had just one recurring thought. What have I done? Head bowed, he trudged away, shivering, distraught, alone.
I don't even know what to say. Do I regret voting for Chase Oliver? Yes. And no, how sad it is. But the fact since I didn't vote for Don, I am not going to get my issued parcel of the land that we're going to own very soon. So now I don't even get any of that, and I'm so upset about it.
Oh, well, you could have a cheap little parcel of land overlooking the ocean on the Gaza Strip. Beautiful Mediterranean views, hot sun all year round. Condominiums going up by the hour. It's going to be great.
I don't even get one now. I'm with the party that argues with itself about seatbelt laws. So I don't even get to, I got nothing. Other than a beautiful intro, I have that.
Well, you have that, I suppose.
And you made Illinois sound so poetic. Like, it was incredible. Nobody's ever thought of the state that way. It sounded amazing.
Especially happy with the sign with the buckshot.
But
what is it like in the midst of winter? All the kids with their huge parkas on, their faces kind of like, rounded by huge fluffy hoods. That must be kind of cute and everything.
Oh, absolutely. My daughter is that way. But my sons have the same problem that most teenage and preteen boys have, where they are deathly afraid that people will discover
that they own a coat.
So,
no.
Yeah, you can't be letting people know you own a freaking coat or honestly closed-toed shoes. So they're keeping up the ruse. No one's suspected yet that they actually own outerwear. So that's good. Good for them.
Cool. All right. Well, on to our next guest, I suppose. Like all the boys in his village, my featured guest was sent off to boarding school at the age of 3.5, where at first he was a bit down in the mouth, until matron, leaning to hear his whimpers, replied with a jaunty fiddlesticks, and the principal assured him he would be tickety-boo. He soon realized the prep school was chock-a-block with neat things, and then he was off to the races. At an exclusive public school, he learned to lustily sing Hearts of Oak and partook in a few more or less obligatory bacchanals after lights out in the dorms. Then he eventually fetched up as a YouTuber, broadcasting from a room overlooking a common and priory church and surrounded by breakfront bookcases of 18th century volumes with armorial bookplates, the pages of which, in contrast to his preferences elsewhere, he rather prizes for being uncut. He can provide answers to anything one might ask. Should one opt for the Madeira or the Ratafia? Do the treatises of Edmund Burke have a viable place in contemporary discourse? And why is it called breeding when, in terms of physiognomy, it is demonstrably not possible? With answers to hopefully some of these questions is the little Platoon.
Hello, hello. It's been a long time since I've moaned matron, but I could reprise it if needs be later in the stream.
I'm just a dumb colonial from the middle of nowhere, so I unabashedly say that I have a deep and abiding fascination with you and your background, and firing darts at a dartboard that are obviously way off the mark, but it still provides me with endless.
Honey, you make it sound so much more interesting than the real version. It's great. This is the life I could have led.
Well, it's midnight in the UK, and it's midnight culturally as well. Despot of Antrim will be along with us shortly. He just has a few responsibilities, and then we'll be able to get underway properly. So I guess we ought to get underway with the culture, and I suppose we'll just start with these. So I wanted to ask both of you, if you were the studio executives, which one would you choose as the least bad option that you would be bracing for in the coming days, weeks, and months? Which are the least bad out of these two? Considering the budgets that you've had, the cultural disasters swirling around, and I guess a kind of apathy as well. So which is in the worst state out of these two?
That is a really tricky question to answer, because both of them, in Snow White's case, it's publicly massively disliked. There's a huge amount of animosity toward its main lead in particular. Everybody in our sphere certainly knows about it, but its saving grace is that it's still a kids' movie, and it's still a timeless, an adaptation, of a timeless classic. For people who aren't constantly online, how much of the Rachel Ziegler horrific CGI monstrosities stuff has bled through, I don't know. I kind of expect it to do a little bit better than like internet discourse would have you believe. And then for Captain America, on the other hand, again, massively talked about, massively disparaged. Nobody knows who Captain America actually is anymore because he's not really a character, but it has the name and it has the shield and it's got the Red Hulk in it. And I booked my ticket to it earlier today, and my cinema is pretty much packed out for the opening day, which I've not seen for some time. So the fact that it has name recognition and it's been so long since a Marvel movie came out, I think again might stand it in good stead. However, as against its massive budget, which is overblown and overblown and overblown, it's not going to make it back. Their best hope is that it will break even, and that will entirely depend on what the quality is, how they've managed to stitch together the 4 different versions of the movie they've created over the many years they've been making it.
It might be a strange phenomenon where it actually, in the cultural zeitgeist, it actually is received well and it feels like a kind of big event film, and yet doesn't make money. I can't remember an instance where that might have happened. It's a very strange scenario. They definitely doubled and tripled down on the marketing. Every bus stop shelter, every magazine, 5-second ads at the beginning of things. They're absolutely tripling down on it. And so I don't know, I think it's going to be hugely popular, and it might just barely scrape past its half a billion, which feels like a very strange thing to say.
I'm not as optimistic on that one. I would still, if I were an executive, I would choose Brave New World because I think it's going to do the least damage. I think it's going to be a fart in the wind, and I believe that the first weekend will be a little popular because you'll have some folks that are curious. What is this going to be? What are they going to do? But once the news gets around and the word of mouth gets around that it is either Marvel's level of Frankenfilm, that you can clearly see that it was 3 different movies that were all chopped together and it doesn't even agree with itself in parts, or at best, people will say, it's okay. It was a movie. There was a thing. Stuff happened. So it was all right. I think that's the best you're going to hear about it. And
the dude doesn't do anything. He doesn't have any super serum. He's just a dude. So
he'll have to
I don't get it.
It'll be vibranium suit is how they're going to that's how they're going to have to explain all of the Hulk punching and everything. But I think that one's going to come and go, and it won't do a lot of damage because I think people are very apathetic about Marvel anyway. But Snow White, I believe, is going to be like a Velma situation. Maybe. We don't know what the plot is, but it might be one of those things where Velma happened and it was, hey, we took a thing that you like from your childhood and we just crapped on it as much as we could in your face. Suck it, chuds. And I think that's what might be happening with Snow White. And in that case, it's going to be far worse for Disney than the forgettable but money-losing Captain America. Uh-oh.
Oh no, have we lost him?
Well, I'm glad it's not just me.
Oh no, it's just us. We can take over the channel. It's all part of the plan. It's a brave new world, as we've now seen on the screen. He'll be back, I'm sure. Yeah, because I'm kind of, I guess we are literally running the show at this point. So
I'm surprised that the stream is still up if he's having problems.
But obviously, you're a dad, you've got kids. So when it comes to Snow White, are you interested? Is it the kind of thing are your kids interested? I think it's probably a better question. Like, are they really keen to go and see it because it's still in the cultural zeitgeist for people of their age, or is it kind of passed them by?
No, they're not interested. I don't think that the animated Snow White for young kids, that's not really a very popular thing. They're much, well, my kids aren't crazy about the live action stuff anyway, so none of it has really grabbed them. They're not angry or upset, like, you know, they have no negative feelings towards it, but I don't think a lot of children are hearing about this and thinking, yes, my favorite cartoon is getting a live action something. I think that a lot of kids are going to be very interested in Moana. That, yeah, I think will be nightmare fuel and an atrocity, and insulting to the concept of film and stories and people and Samoans and so many other things. But kids are going to want to go see that one. But I don't think kids care about Snow White.
When is the live action Moana? Because Moana 2 came out quite recently, didn't it? And it did pretty well, I think. I've been sort of out of the loop with that one for a while, but I believe it made quite a bit of money.
I hate that it made any at all. I actually don't know. Let me look this up real quick. Little box office mojo. Fuck me. $1 billion worldwide.
So it made a little bit of money, yeah.
I hate this timeline.
Against what I imagine is a pretty low production cost. I can't remember which studio is behind the animation, but it doesn't look like one of the big premium expensive ones. It looks more like an Illumination kind of deal from what I saw on the trailers. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. Snow White, I don't know. There's kind of that degree to which people, I think, have fallen out of love with Disney live actions generally. And like The Lion King obviously has been making less money each time they bring it back. Mufasa made less money than the one before it. So will that still be in play? And you've also frozen on my screen. So am I still the only person here now? Or are you still here? Okay, chat. It's just you and me now. I'm assuming chat's still here. Say hello if you're still here, chat. Can't say I had this on the cards for this evening.
I'm back.
Oh, you're back. Oh, God. It was just me for an alarming amount of time.
I've been having internet problems too, but I think I've got bad hardware. Oh man.
Yeah, but I was just saying, yeah, because all the Lion King, I don't even want to call them live action remakes because they're not live action, but you know, it's quote unquote live action remakes have made less and less money each time. Yeah. Mufasa, I don't think did particularly well. So there's kind of that fatigue, I think, has been setting in, that Disney is no longer synonymous with quality even for safe children's entertainment in the way that something like Moana evidently is. Even like the Sonic movie, which probably was a slightly older age demographic, but still known to be quite safe, reliable, good, entertaining fun.
Yeah.
And I imagine from a parent's perspective, that's kind of what you're looking for. You want a movie that it is safe to take your kids to, and then just sit there while they have fun, and you don't necessarily have to invest too much in it yourself. And it's whether or not the cut through with Snow White and all of the brouhaha around Rachel Ziegler has put parents off, which will determine whether that film tanks or just about holds water, if that's not a mixed metaphor, which it might be.
No, I think you're absolutely right. And the real question is whether the kids are even going to enjoy it. That was the issue with Moana 2, is we went and saw it and even my children were bored. So whereas something like Sonic, the kids were having a blast. I think my older kids went and saw Mufasa. They said they really enjoyed it. But I think that Snow White is going to be boring. And that's another issue with the live action ones. We went and saw the Little Mermaid remake, and my kids were bored to tears. A lot of kids were bored in the theater. There was a lot of child boredom noise. They were rolling around. There was a lot of fussiness because it was over 2 hours long, because the people making these things forget that that is the demographic. And after 90 minutes, kids are kind of tapped out on movie length, and they don't want to see long drawn out sequences of people staring at one another and not a lot of motion happening. I mean, that just is what it is for the audience. And I fear that Snow White might be that same way. It might be very boring because that's what they think live action needs to be.
Live action, and also the color palette stuff, which is, I always think, a big underappreciated thing about kids' entertainment in particular. The thing animation is so great at it is these wonderfully characterful designs, but it's incredibly bright and it's very vivid, and there's always something that you can feast your eyes upon. With Little Mermaid, I vaguely remember being kind of bored by the whole aesthetic. It's quite dark, it's quite dingy. I can't imagine a huge amount of like magic being imparted from the screen and the designs into children's little immersive imaginations. They turned Flounder, one of the most expressive characters in the animated film, into just generic fish. Fishes aren't good at expressions. He's not good at an expression. I think the voice actor did his best, but then of course you had the awful Awkwafina seagull thing. I don't know that Snow White's got that problem though. Judging by the trailers, it's almost gone too far the other way. It's like someone's vomited Skittles all over the screen.
Well, they're leaning into purple a lot. That seems to be when people don't. Last year there was this video game that came out, Dragon Age: The Veilguard, and it was panned. The writing was very bad, and the gameplay apparently is not that great. But it seems that amateur art directors or people that aren't real familiar with how to make something look good without going too hard, it seems like purple and bright green are the things that they believe add pop or whatever. And that game was full of purple. I think Snow White is going to be as well, and a lot of green, a whole lot of green.
Well, and some horrific looking magical creatures as well. Of all the redesigns I've seen in recent years, what the were they thinking? They're terrifying. I would expect children to be screaming, not laughing and enjoying these weird creations. Is it like somewhere there are 7 dwarves that Peter Dinklage has made unemployed and homeless, and they could have been in this movie, but they're not, because he pulled up the little ladder behind him, and so now we have these things. And it's hard to know, because obviously one of the big talking points was when they gave that foretaste of the song, didn't they? And like she hands the broom over to the weird monstrosity, so it has to do the cleaning, whereas in the original she cleans because she's being nice to them. And it's hard to know whether that's because there's a technical restriction, because they just can't move her around these creations very easily holding a broom, and so they've sort of had to change the structure of the scene itself to accommodate the fact that she's not acting against anything, or whether they are just leaning into this very changed conception of her character as being from dutiful and nice and fundamentally normal for a princess. She is now quite regal and aloof, and she will have no qualms at all about turning small creatures into her slaves.
Well, I think it's going to be that one. Part of it, I think, will be just the CGI stuff. They didn't know what to do. But I think a lot of it, just judging from the interviews that she's given and the smug attitude that she brings, and the fact that she did bring up that in this version, they're talking about who's the fairest and not, the prettiest, but who's the most just, who's the most moral or whatever, which was never the implication of Ferris. But so the fact that they're doing that, the various ways that Zegler talks about the old movies and how aged they are and how that just automatically disqualifies them from being anything worthwhile. I think that they're going to go with what they wanted to do with Belle in the Beauty and the Beast remake, and they thought they were doing by just giving her a less fancy dress. I think they're going to want to lean more into that with this movie. But I'm also interested to see if Zegler has the acting chops to act in a room all by herself, because that adds a new layer when you have other people to play off of. And you can tell when people are in a scene together, and you can tell with some actors when they're just on a green screen by themselves and they have to carry the weight of the scene with no other human being to share emotions with. It's very difficult. And that's one thing that I'm going to be looking out for in the cottage scenes is how does she seem when it's very clear that they had to shoot all of it in a sea of blue and fill the rest in later? What was she able to make with that?
All right, and that, I don't know what happened. Some sort of carnage happened, but we've also got. So you guys have been holding the everything up for us in the meantime. That's fantastic. Well done.
One very brief and terrifying moment, Greg also lost connection. So it was literally just me on your stream.
Oh, that's so good.
You got invited onto a stream, and then it was hated. You got punked. It's all you.
Ooh. Well, I got to introduce our guest. In South Korea, where there is a pronounced crisis and national angst about declining fertility rates, my next guest's face has been plastered onto gigantic billboards overlooking motorways, has gazed out from popular magazines, flickered on millions of devices in punchy 5-second pre-roll ads, and featured in full-page PSAs in the Seoul Shinmun and Korea Herald newspapers. Above the slogan, "Testosterone pride in outsider, make great example for male citizens, create expectant spouse." Here's Despot of Antrim.
How's it going, lads? When I was trapped on the on the guest panel waiting to come in, watching Platoon and Greg go at it. I felt like a man who leaves his house and says, "Bye-bye, darling, I'm off to work." And he leaves his house and then he realizes he's forgotten his keys. And he goes back to get the key, but the whole house is locked, the door is locked, the window is locked, and he can hear these moans of pleasure coming from the bedroom. And he walks around and he looks through the window and there's his wife banging the neighbor, and he can't get in to do anything about it. He's just trapped and has to listen to her, loving every minute of it. That's how I felt locked out of this stream just now.
Well, I remember when I was on stream, it was just the two of us. And then you went away to the bathroom. I had this weird, strange existential feeling. There's 500 people watching me right now. What do I say? and it was very strange. It seemed to go on forever too.
I feel like that's he likes to test people. He did that to me too. The first time we streamed together, he was like, "I gotta go, carry it." Left.
I worked really hard on my Star Wars pitch, Echo, but now I don't feel like I overdid it after listening to your Greg Owen introduction. That was brilliant, and you really do your research. I like the fact that you include this whole Shinmun. There is no such paper, although
was it not? Oh.
There. Quick fact: I work for the Chosunilbo, which is like the ultra right wing sort of Korean media giant over here. It's like the Fox News of Korea, except more right wing.
Right. There's one called the Dong something paper. I thought I could try and work that in, but yeah. Anyway, speaking of catastrophic fallings out, there were just these two films, and I was speculating that Captain America could be a film that makes $1 billion and yet doesn't make a profit, which strikes me as some weird new phenomenon.
I don't think it'll make $1 billion, but I do think the same thing will happen with Mufasa. Mufasa flopped domestically, but the international market carried it over the profit line. And I think that Brave New World will do very well internationally, especially if they Chinese posterify Anthony Mackie.
I have a quick question. Was I the wife or the stud in?
Well, I mean,
I like to think of myself
little Platoon,
bowl, but I don't know.
No, you were the on the receiving end, Greg.
So that means I'm your wife.
There's no
adds
shame
new
in it.
weird layers.
By the way, it's been noted that Snow White has now crept over 1 million downvotes, which is a phenomenal collective effort. I don't know.
Has that ever happened before? Because I was doing research on this, for my worst of woke awards, and I couldn't find a more disliked trailer. And that one has it's a 96% dislike ratio. Now it's like 1.1 million dislikes. They're beautiful numbers. I'm loving it. But I don't recall a movie trailer receiving 1 million dislikes before.
So going back to my Anthony Mackie problem, the dude doesn't have any intrinsic powers, which seems kind of really lame. You got, your Hawkeye types who are just kind of meh because they don't really have any cool powers. So if a guy who doesn't have like the strength serum or whatever he has, it's kind of like having Spider-Man who doesn't have any like actual powers, but he can just sort of fling ropes and swing from one building to the next. Like it's not really that exciting.
There's also it creates the problem as well that Red Hulk is supposed to be basically a demigod, right? It's beyond powerful. It's like almost deifically powerful. And if Anthony Mackie can fight him without superpowers, it just cheapens Red Hulk. Red Hulk was supposed to be a massive reveal and a big deal, and it just cheapens Red Hulk, which that's the real shame for me. I mean, it'd be a good movie if they did something with that. If Anthony Mackie said, "Look, I cannot fight this guy. He'll kill me in 5 seconds. I need to, either take the serum or I need to contact somebody else to help me." But they're not going to go that way. They'll just make it very generic.
Yeah, that's why Batman versus Superman was ridiculous, because the power disparity is too dumb to actually be realistic.
Yeah, but I mean, it was the moral thing, like the fact that they turned Batman into a murderer who enters into a conspiracy with Alfred to murder Superman. I despise that movie. It was the complete moral inversion of Batman. Like, Batman is now a conspiratorial murderer. Just awful. Hate that movie.
Is there an outside chance that Snow White could actually surprise, and that the vast swaths of the general culture don't really care about the ins and outs and the intricacies, and you might have hundreds of thousands or millions of little girls with Snow White little vinyl backpacks, and it kind of takes off and actually becomes a thing? Is there an outside chance?
In order for it to take off, you would need to do really good international numbers, and they can't, because they made the same mistake they did with The Little Mermaid. See, the biggest race swapping Ariel was a huge mistake for Disney, not for cultural for cultural reasons, obviously, but the main one was commercial. It's like changing the Coca-Cola can to blue. You lose your brand, because The Little Mermaid is internationally, it's a really recognizable, iconic brand, but the brand is the pale white mermaid with the big flowing red hair. Now, if they had gotten an actress who looks like that to play Ariel for their horrible live action abomination, they would have made over $1 billion, because the international market would have carried it just through the brand recognition. But they haven't done that with Snow White. If they'd gone with the really sort of classically beautiful pale white Snow White instead of Rachel Zegler, they might have had a chance. But Rachel Zegler, she's simply too plain, and she doesn't look like what Snow White's supposed to look like. I don't know if she's not. She's Latino. I don't really like Latino white. It's not that different, but it's just not. They haven't captured the classic branding of the movie. So
They've
I don't
made
think
the
it's gonna
mistake, I think, the broader. I think you can make Rachel Zegler beautiful. The key to many little girls' hearts is does this character look beautiful? Can I be this character? Basic kind of child projection. Like, young girls in particular love dressing up as beautiful characters. It's just what young girls tend to do. Even The Little Mermaid, I thought, did not a brilliant job for the reasons you've outlined, but it did an okay enough job in the sense that it made her attractive enough that it wasn't viscerally off-putting. Like, enough young girls could see themselves in even a race-swapped Little Mermaid. And that movie did do okay on streaming after the fact. It didn't do particularly well in cinemas, but after it ticks up numbers-wise slowly but quite steadily, I think, and ended up, I think it more than broke even in the end. With Snow White, they've taken an actress who I think could be attractive, but they've made her into Lord Farquaad, which is not attractive. And I think the biggest mistake they probably would have made with this character is by trying to stick, perversely, too closely to the 1940s aesthetic, particularly with the weird haircut she's got going on, which doesn't particularly suit her. And so I don't know that many young girls will be sitting there watching Snow White and be sufficiently distracted from the horrific dwarves to say, yeah, this girl's beautiful, I want to look like her, because why would you want to look like her?
Yeah, I mean,
so trying to get two aesthetics of it's a relatable everyday girl that you can project yourself on to imagine being, clashing with the idea that you also want it to be a fantasy princess that you could fantasize being as lovely and charming and beautiful. Trying to do both at once, and it just kind of falls through the cracks in between.
Yeah. Well, I have girls. You have to make the dress look outstanding. I think that was an issue with the live action Beauty and the Beast, is that Emma what's her name? She wanted, she thought it was a feminist statement to dress down the dress. And I own a lot of Disney dresses. I have
clip that. I just want that. As
yeah,
a little
I have so many dresses. They're extra large. They're adult man size. No, I have a lot.
Remember, guys, he didn't say my daughter has. He said I have.
I have.
Right?
Because it's my money. I'm the alpha. I make all the money. Let me tell you something, gentlemen. Okay,
don't overcompensate.
What to
it's fine,
do.
Greg.
I staple my fingers
fine.
like this.
There's
when
nothing
I tell her
wrong.
What to do,
There's nothing wrong with dressing up like a dress like a little girl. It's fine. Some guys are into that. I support you, man. We all support you. You don't need to be embarrassed about it.
Just makes me feel pretty. But yeah, I've had a lot of Disney princess dresses come through here, and the big fancy ones are the ones that little girls want to buy. That's what they want. They want tulle all over them. They bonus points for fucking glitter that gets everywhere. Yeah, the more ribbons and pleats and all of that. That's what's going to sell it. And I don't remember. It's been so long since I've seen Snow White. I don't know if she has a change into like a big fancy dress later. But even in this poster, I don't see my daughter seeing that and being like, that's what I want to wear for Halloween. I'm dying to wear that. She's still wearing the Elsa dress from, I think Frozen 2 is the one where it's more of a white with a flowy, translucent bit there.
I mean, the yellow dress has the kind of like the texture of like a taffeta kind of thing. You know, like the ribbon texture when corporate gifts and they have like a red ribbon around the boxes. It's that kind of thin, kind of matty taffeta texture. Doesn't look like the real thing.
Elsa was huge. When I was teaching kindergarten, little girls would come in their Elsa princess dresses. And I don't mean like on Halloween, just on a Tuesday, they'd come in wearing an Elsa dress. And they also had this little accessory. It was Elsa's blonde, not ponytail. What do you call it?
Plait?
Is it a plait? A plait? Well, that thing anyway. And they would just clip it to their hair and wear it like that. And Elsa, Disney made an absolute ton on merch out of Frozen. I don't think the merch sales will compensate for the box office losses for Snow White, but we'll see. I mean, the international box office might surprise, unfortunately.
Yeah,
Platoon's argument has me worried.
You guys there was one error I do want to point out. According to director Julius Ona, Captain America does have a superpower. Okay, it's empathy. That's fuck off. So
well, hold on now, because if you remember, as Amanda Stenberg teaches us in her piece Discourse, white people don't have empathy. So it is something of a superpower.
It will be supremely ironic and fitting if Captain America is more of a Snow White character than Snow White is, and she's got more of the morals and the sort of the go-get-em attitude that Captain America should have. I can see that inversion being, well, it could be like another Barbenheimer. It's just like, imagine these characters have swapped places, and you've got Snow White fighting the Red Hulk, and with her attitude, she might win. Maybe that would be successful. But empathy as a superpower. But they've already they've tried that with him before. This is the tricky thing with Anthony Mackie's Captain Falcon is that, I think we were talking about it backstage, he's not got a huge amount of screen time in any of the Avengers movies or any of the Marvel movies up until quite recently. I think, Greg, you said he's got like half an hour in total across phases 1 through 3. That would be, wouldn't it?
I looked it up. It was 30 minutes on the nose, apparently.
Yeah, and he's mostly there to be a little bit of moral / ideological support for Captain America, and it's in the big argument over, say, the Sokovia Accords, and you've got Captain America's faith in old-fashioned American individual liberties versus Tony Stark's kind of tech-minded embrace of regulation as the only key to a successful, sustainable future. And Falcon is kind of on Cap's side, and he's just there to say, yeah, I agree, basically. There's not a huge amount they do with his character and motive up until basically the end of Endgame, which is when he gets given the shield, is one of the first moments you even have a hint of what's coming. And then, of course, they go straight into the Falcon and the Winter Soldier when he is a different character. The character who used to be on Cap's side with respect to the government not controlling everybody's lives, it's about you bettering yourself, then turns around and says, no, we must encourage the government to fix all of our problems because only the government can do it. You got to do better, Senator. And so he's become a different character which is still not much of a character, but it's a very different character than the one he used to be. And it's one that's just fundamentally less compelling than Captain America's was, because he's, the original Captain America, Steve Rogers speaks to an old-fashioned but still universalist American self-conception in a way that the Falcon bitching about its institutional racism doesn't. So it very much depends where they're going to even try and take this character. Are they going to try and make him more like Steve Rogers light, like he used to be? I think that would be the sensible thing to do. Or will they carry on making him nagging senators and trying to get bailouts for disadvantaged communities because his superpower is empathy?
I do hope that in a perverse kind of way that I do trigger some kind of fracas or PR disaster just so I can write my apology in Comic Sans. I'm kind of looking forward to that. It'll just be a nice little thing. But to kind of divest Captain America of the whole, that America thing. It's a bit passe. It's a bit silly. And try and make it universal ethics, I suppose, rather than any kind of American ideal of or conception of itself as being that thing. I guess, is it tied somehow to the idea that America, for about 6 or 7 decades, underwrote global security, and so it had that kind of eminence that went with it, and is there kind of like this latent or subconscious idea that that's not really America's prestigious role anymore, or that it can't live up to that anymore? So divest yourself of that and just go for some kind of universalist ethic about morality and empathy and togetherness. I don't know.
That's my impression. It's the modern Marvel Cinematic Universe is written by people who are sort of locked in this perpetual state of cultural cringe. These are people who don't understand what the original cast of the Avengers were supposed to represent. And they're very closely tied to archetypes in the American moral character. Captain America Captain America allows America to hold it like a mirror up to the way the country is going, but it gives you this strong anchor point of this is the history, this is the past, this is the virtue on which we were built. Now we can examine our country as they do in, say, The Winter Soldier and as they do in Civil War against this lens of what it means to be an American. And that's a very important part of his character. Much the same thing as, Tony Stark is emblematic of the tech mindset that's predominated into the last 10, 20 years and the pitfalls of that. Steve Banner is, the capacity for science to create horrors, as American scientists have discovered over and over again. But these are all universalist kind of virtuous approaches to character in a way that we don't seem to be interested in now. You can have universal virtuous characters, or you can have characters preaching about universal ethics and regulation, which is what they want to do, because that's the kind of person who writes this kind of shit now. It's just nowhere near as compelling. Nobody looks to a regulator or a senator and says, yeah, I really want to be that person. They've got a point. Everyone wants to vote them out. That's what we want.
Yeah. So the fairest of them all is oh, look at that.
He's the kind of guy that just, it's like it tweets. I mean, it's like his dialogue was just it was a tweet stream of someone who just is on their couch saying how everyone else needs to change, and then the world would be a perfect place. So
Echo, remove that from the stage so we can get a close-up of Greg.
I'll try.
It's so beautiful.
So my movie of the year is Emilia Pérez. And I think
that would have been number 2 for me on my worst of the year. I still say story. Joker 2 is worse, but Emilia Pérez would have been my second worst if I'd known it existed at the time.
Well, Plutz, I want to get your thoughts. Here's your list. Which one are you backing? If you could choose which one to win, which way would you lean?
Oh, these the Oscars contenders. Ooh, that's which Oscars are we talking about? Because the director for Emilia Pérez, he only said that Spanish is the language of poor immigrants and that Mexico has a skill issue and there's no talented people there. So you're allowed to say that, so he might still win. Whereas unfortunate Ms. Gascon said some things that you're not allowed to say, so she won't win. I suspect a complete unknown will get something, because why not?
Have you seen it, Platoon?
I have not seen it, no. I don't. I mean, musical biopics are not really my thing, even with Timothée Chalamet in them. So I might see it eventually, but I haven't got around to it yet. Most of these, to be fair, I haven't seen.
There was a fascinating recurring dynamic in my Emilia Pérez videos of comments uniformly along the lines of, I don't like him, but I agree with his comments on Islam. And I thought that's such a fascinating construction. That's where we're at culturally. But you've got June 2. There's a bit of a Chalamet action there. His hair ruffled and glinting in the low sunsets.
I'm just not sure what that would win for. I mean, the most sterile adaptation. It's just
Yeah.
it's so visually kind of impressive, and yet nothing. There's a nothingness to it, and it's not obviously ticking any big boxes, which the Oscars likes to do.
Were you stirred by the new Pope having refused a hysterectomy in Conclave?
I have not seen that, no. So
But you got that to look forward to.
You ruined the big twist.
Yeah. Now,
It's amazing.
Platoon can't enjoy the big reveal that the Pope is a hermaphrodite.
really,
Yeah. That's how that movie ends.
I'm now more confident that it will win.
So it takes the whole Luke, I'm your father twist and turns it into Catholics, I am a hermaphrodite.
Luke, it's complicated.
Oh goodness. But yeah, perhaps you saw The Substance, Platoon?
Honestly, I'm shockingly light on numbers of these I've watched. I think I've only seen Dune and Emilia Pérez of the two to see.
It's an odd pairing out of these 10. Yeah. Well, Emilia Pérez, it's fascinating. What an absolutely fascinating film. I've had a field day of this, and it's just been, I mean, like, I was trying to make a video, but everything would change on a 24-hour news cycle basis, and new stuff would come out. It's incredible stuff. Where do you even begin with this film? These two heard my penis to vagina acoustic ballad version last time, which I played, which I might reprise later. Yeah, so the director went to Mexico because he had a vision in his head of what it would be like, ideally, in a kind of a visceral, exciting way. Found it wasn't to his liking, so then went back to France to film the thing on sound stages to create the authentic inauthenticity that he was looking for. Just an interesting way to create an aesthetic.
It's such a fascinating case study. For all the reasons the Oscars like this movie, every single one of them reveals the massive hypocrisy that comes out. It turns out it's fine if you insult not only an entire country in Mexico, but most of a continent in also the Spanish-speaking world. It's fine if you do all of that. It's fine if you're a French director because it's artsy if you imply that, a bunch of people are just poor and their country's cheap and inauthentic, and that actually, yeah, it's completely acceptable to make a comedic musical out of the drug cartel wars, which have taken, like 100,000 disappeared and 500,000 dead or something like that. That's all fine. But if you, as an actress, choose as you like, comes out and says basically conventional online right-wing opinions that many people in Europe hold about, we just say, integration problems with Islam in Europe, then you're not allowed. That's bad. You can't say that. That's verboten.
What was interesting about the movie was that I don't know, maybe they secretly nominated it as like a protest, but what I find ironic about it is that it kind of affirms a lot of the worst stereotypes that people don't like to talk about with trans issues. Like, nobody likes to talk about trans widows, the women who have just been abandoned because guys have a fetish and they want to be a woman. A lot of folks said it was very problematic when Emilia tackles his former wife and growls, and they thought that was I've seen that happen. So that also was hilariously accurate, and this movie weirdly sent a lot of accurate messages that people don't like and they don't want to talk about. And I might actually, the more I think about it, I might rank this movie a bit higher than some of the other ones because they accidentally sort of expose some of those things that people don't want to talk about, that you can't have a lifetime of being a man and then during emotional highs not accidentally slip into your former behavior patterns and speech patterns as a man. And I've seen people online that thought that scene was ridiculous. It was so horrible and insulting. And I thought, well, you guys don't know. You've never been around one of these folks, because I've heard that happen before. It's very accurate. Nobody likes to talk about the trans widows. Nobody likes to talk about the absolute moral selfishness in this movie. It's hilarious that this person who's disappeared a whole lot of people suddenly wants pats on the back to find them, and everybody she even says in the movie, I feel so good. This makes me feel so good. And it's like, yeah, you feel good. You were responsible for most of these people being missing. But now that you feel good, you're going to pursue this.
I heard a brilliant analogy for this. It was, imagine a movie where after World War II, a former SS officer who was responsible for, I don't want to get Echo's channel demonetized, for what the Germans called Jewish actions. That was the term that they used in the East. They were so this guy performed Jewish actions on thousands of Jews. And after the war, he decides, you know what? I want to become a woman. So he becomes a woman. And then he joins some organization to help find the bodies of Jews who were murdered by the German SS. And he's lauded for this, and everybody calls him a hero. Like, there's no moral difference between that and Emilia Pérez.
Well, you've called this a moral catastrophe, but don't we have to reckon with the fact that it's a French director? It's not a straight down the line moral parable or story or thing about rejuvenation or finding your true self in a stretched down the line sense. It's meant to be a kind of giddy, glorious, gleeful, kind of stroppy, full of life escapade of a film that kind of doesn't make morality its central focus, but makes the flamboyance and pizzazz and fullness of life of this crazy person, and leaves its kind of moral irony at the door to allow this to flash across our screens in something which is meant to be dazzling and visceral for its own sake. Is there an element of that?
That would work if the movie didn't take a moral stance on the idea of transitioning as a married man with kids. And it does. It absolutely does. It suggests that to do so is to become self-actualized in a true sense, and to reject the falseness of your real life or of your fake life as a father and embrace your real life as a woman. That's self-actualization. That's good. And they even have a song about how good it is. And then at the end, she's sanctified. Or you know, they have this little funeral where they march around in a very stereotypical Mexican dusty village, because that's what the French director sees in his head when he thinks of Mexico. So this movie has a very clear moral stance. I don't mind movies that just sort of step back from the morality of it and examine, well, this is the reality of the situation. A superb movie that shows some really harrowing stuff. Steve McQueen, who actually became something of a sort of racialist radical. He's like a very black identitarian now. He recently directed, I haven't seen it, Blitz. Has anybody seen Blitz?
Oh yeah, that's where there's the biracial son who has to get to the countryside.
Yeah. It sounds pretty bad, but his early work is amazing. He did 12 Years a Slave, but his movie Hunger, which is about the Irish hunger strikers during the the Thatcher years, Bobby Sands and so forth. Platoon might know what I'm talking about. That's a movie where you have, let's just be serious. You have a group of terrorists who are starving themselves to death in protest against the policies of the British government, and it's very politically and morally complicated. But the movie doesn't take a stance on that. It just sort of shows the consequences of this horrible conflict, and that's amazing. If Emilia Pérez was a bit more like that, maybe there could be something there, but it has absolutely no interest in examining the consequences of gang warfare or transition. It has a very clear moral stance.
It doesn't know what is interesting about it. There's a number of things in it which I genuinely think could have been made into a really interesting movie. If you'd got rid of effectively the entire middle third, which is just the director going out and insulting Mexico, and you'd made it a very, very condensed and focused story about a man who, he's got a criminal past, he wants to transition, because he wants to live his life as a woman. He abandons his wife, he abandons his kids, and then he realizes over time that he can't. Transitioning is not what he thought it was. When you have the line at the beginning of the movie when is asked, do you want to change your life or change your sex? And he says, well, what's the difference? Realizes over time that is untrue, realizes that you can't escape your past, you have to reckon with it, that you have to apologize, and then sacrifices himself, herself for the person that he loved, she loved. At the end, making an apology for a fundamental misconception, which is that sex changes are changing society, are changing the soul, whatever the fuck the movie's line was. That could have been more interesting. And some of that is in the movie, because you do get the apology moment to Selena Gomez's character shortly before, inexplicably, a car falls off a cliff and everybody explodes. And then she gets turned into the Virgin Mary. If you'd got rid of all of that nonsense, then it could have been a really interesting film. But unfortunately, the director had to go and tell Mexico that it also has to do better. Because it's really, really simple, right? You can solve this conflict. All you need is to go and ask the prisoners where they hid the bodies, and they'll just tell you.
Yeah, and it's not like the prisoners aren't going to say, "Okay, I'll tell you, give me $10,000." No, they just tell them because they feel bad.
Well, one of them says, "I want to learn how to calculate that 1 + 2 = 3." That's a bit. You fucking can't. You just did. But I get the idea, right? It's self-actualization. It's another part of that message. These people are moral and they have a conscience, and if you appeal to that conscience, then conscience will win out in the end. Except if you're Emilia Pérez, in which case it doesn't, because very simple solution as well, which is that she knows where all the bodies are buried because she buried them there. She knows who all the corrupt people are because she paid them off. She could stand up as the head of this NGO she founds and say, "Look, I did this. This is where the bodies are. Here are all the people that were doing it with me. I'm going to sacrifice myself to redeem the country." But that would be a different film, and I think that would be an interesting film, but it's not the film that we've got here. Separate those ideas, make 2 separate movies, maybe something could work.
I'm going to try one more time to be the devil's advocate for this very gaudy Beelzebub. Platoon, are you familiar with the term of the Carnivalesque from literature?
The Carnivalesque is in just like a carnival.
Well, it's very kind of French European. Carnivalesque is a literary and theoretical concept that uses humor and chaos to challenge and subvert dominant social norms, so offering a chance for liberation and transgression. So is that kind of what they're going for, to use chaos and color and humor to challenge and subvert dominance as social norms? So while it's not on a surface literal level as a moral construct, in amongst all the chaos and humor, it's like little pushes and prods of morality here and there. That's the best I can do for this French director dude.
I mean, his own reasoning is that cinema and film does not provide answers, it just asks questions. So I think those approaches can be made to... I wouldn't be surprised, if he'd been inspired by Carnivalesque, because that is how the movie reads. Problem is, it sort of does try and give answers, it just gives really bad ones.
Yeah, I mean, Zoe Saldana literally looks down the barrel of the camera and gives this big thing about all those the lives that were not led. I will be your voice.
Yeah. And then she goes around lecturing all the evil politicians. Of course, that song's up for best song, isn't it, at the Oscars? The one where she talks about how evil rich people are, having lived her entire life on the payroll of an evil rich person. She even has a line saying, "Of course I have a problem with it if we're funded by dirty money." But bitch, who the fuck's paying you? Yeah. Look, what you helped somebody get away with mass murder. You're in no position to complain, and then somehow manages to end up with his kids at the end, which is a very strange conclusion to that movie.
Well, she probably doesn't smell like their old dad, so that's one thing, I suppose.
I liked that scene. That's the one scene in the movie I liked, because that sort of ties. There is the scene for anyone in chat. I'll just say for chat who hasn't seen the movie, presumably there is a scene where Emilia Pérez, before transition, sends the family away to Switzerland and then fakes her own death before transition. After transition, realizes she wants the family back, so brings the family back, but they don't know that she is the father. There's a scene in at night, and she's sort of kissing the kids goodbye and to bed, and one of the kids starts singing about these smell-associated memories that are beginning to... You can see the impact they're having on Emilia Pérez as a character. The growth moment there is supposed to be she's realizing that she cannot actually let go of these things, and nor should she particularly want to. So that scene itself is quite effective. It's just that they then forget about the kids for the rest of the film.
The worst example of the Proustian Madeleine ever committed in culture. I think it has to be.
Well, and that's where you're correct. Like it does offer a moral perspective. It's not asking questions. It is saying Emilia deserves to live the life that she wants to, and that's good. It's self-actualization, but also deserves to have his kids. He should be able to have his cake and eat it too. And that scene isn't about the kid and the horror of losing his father and never knowing where his father went. The whole scene is about how terrible Emilia feels and the guilt and the sadness and all of that. And it paints Selena Gomez's character as the bad one for kidnapping her. And her boyfriend is a bad guy, even though he's a drug cartel member, just like her ex-husband who she's living with. The entire thing paints Emilia as the one that we should either pity or sympathize with or be excited for. Nobody else matters. That is, I mean, it's the title of the movie because that's the only character that the director gives a shit about.
I don't like it when a petite little snub-nosed cupcake of a pop singer decides she's going to become edgy and reinvent herself, because if she doesn't quite dye the roots of her hair, she'll look raw and authentic. Anyway, okay, Plutz, you're going to have to bring us up to speed with this, because this is flashed up and I don't quite understand it. The UK government has demanded that Apple create a backdoor in its encrypted cloud service in a confrontation that challenges the US tech firm's avowed stance on protecting user privacy. The Home Office has issued a technical capability notice under the Investigatory Powers Act, which requires companies to assist law enforcement in providing evidence. The demand relates to Apple's Advanced Data Protection Service, which uses end-to-end encryption, a form of security that means only the account holder can decrypt the files. No one else can, including Apple. So Apple has touted privacy as its core value and describes it as a fundamental human right, which matters for technical experts, but more importantly, I think for reporters and that kind of stuff. And they think it's an invaluable protection. How can you see this getting resolved? Because if Apple exceeds, their reputation will be in tatters. But for some reason I don't quite understand, the current government is very adamant about this. So what's going on, Platoon?
I'm not all that across this particular instance, but it does periodically come up. I think the prior governments in the UK and I think in the US as well have all attempted to convince Apple to create backdoors into its program so they can, always under the guise of national security, which is why you should always be very skeptical of any argument from national security when it comes to changing policy. I think, I think this is just another example of that. In prior instances, I believe it's been sort of resolved by Apple just agreeing in specific instances to work on a case-by-case basis, not giving a backdoor across the board, but saying, well, okay, you've given us sufficient reason to say this person's, say, on a terror watch list, so we will give you access to their data, which is a really simple solution. That's fine. Well, there's no problem doing that. It's just that governments don't like being beholden to companies very often. They want a backdoor because the backdoor puts them in charge. And they like to think that they can threaten companies into bending their policies and affecting all of their users in order to effectively satisfy the very small egos of the very small-dicked people in the Home Office. I don't see Apple caving to this. Their headquarters isn't, well, they're not headquartered in the UK, I don't think, for their European business anyway. They'll probably come a cropper with the US administration if they do grant this backdoor, because the Trump administration doesn't take kindly to policies of this sort. And the Labour government should just get over it. Just accept that this is Apple's proprietary software and it is people's proprietary data. People are protective of their privacy, and they don't much like the idea that one of the most secure companies in the world should give a backdoor access to a government that still runs on Windows XP. So go fuck yourself, Labour.
It tends to sort of divide on ideological lines people's motivations and priorities. If it's leftish, it's more to do, it's a humanist impulse about protecting the kids, usually. And if it's right-leaning, it's more to do with protecting from the terrorists and national security. So the Patriot Act 2001, the wiretapping program authorized by Bush, bypassed the foreign intelligence, or the FISA courts, to monitor phone and internet communications. And as for encrypted data, the government pushed for backdoors into encryption, but they got pushed back against that. So the obvious question then is, well, people would say that pending or possible terrorist threats are the bigger priority, that go on that moral boundary and tip the scales a bit more. But you could also argue that if there's dozens or hundreds or thousands of kids out there, and if you can decrypt to get to them, that's not too dissimilar. So how do we balance that, the ideological perspectives?
I mean, I'd be tempted to say you don't. I mean, the great thing that the Americans have is, quite a robust constitutional system which transcends people's ideologies, no matter which government's in power. In theory, a private company is able to say private property, so keep your hands off. And people's different. Everyone will always come up with a reason when they're in power to try and impose upon other people. That's always what happens. You need a fairly robust system that can prevent them from doing that. And the US has one. Apple, I hope, doesn't cave. I don't see what reason it would have to cave, even under the Investigatory Powers Act, which is itself quite Orwellian. So, you just uphold the rights of private companies to be private companies, and government can scream and wail and carry on being incompetent.
Well, Apple has denied them in the States, and I'm sure elsewhere as well, because it's good for their brand. I mean, Imagine Apple
Mhm.
users when they find out that the company will just hand over whatever any government wants. They would lose so many customers. So even from a business standpoint, just purely selfish, it's a great move for them to say no to any government that wants the backdoor thing. And I understand the emotional appeal of like we could save kids, we could stop people from being trafficked, and if I really thought that was going to happen, I would be all for it. And I don't have a ton of reasons to not trust the government, but I have a few, and so I don't 100% believe that that's what they want this power for. Our Patriot Act was abused constantly. You're absolutely right. They bypass courts, and I love how they name bills here. I'm sure they do it elsewhere too. That you can't not vote for the Patriot Act. Well, you're not a patriot.
I love it when Congress does that. It's the love puppies and rainbows and ice cream is delicious bill, so no one will ever vote against it. I love it when they do that.
What's the name for that technique where you take a legal bill that has absolutely nothing to do with its title, but you give it a nice title to advertise it? Is it just branding? You just call it positive branding, positive spin, positive optics? There must be a term for that. Like you have a bill that is designed to, make it illegal for conservatives to walk within 1 mile of an abortion clinic, and you call it the Child Protection Bill or something like that.
I think it's called semantic overload, isn't it? When you use a word which is, semantic overload is where you use a word which has one colloquial connotation, but it also has 1,000 other connotations, which is one of which you mean it in, but everyone assumes you mean it in the common sense. So like it's a semantic trick to make people think that the purpose of the act is its intent and its name as opposed to what it actually does.
Yeah.
Tony Blair will still be my favorite when it comes to PR and spin and bullshit. He was the master of tuck in the thing you need to say as a precursor to then rambling on about positive things. So,
we still live with it. I mean, one of the earliest things they did, because Labour did loads of sort of internal polling of people's attitude towards nationalisation, effectively, because it's Labour. They might call themselves new, but they still don't really like private markets. And in the very early days, they polled people on nationalisation, and everybody hated it because nationalised industries don't work. So they thought, okay, what if we call it public ownership? And then they polled people, and people thought, oh, does that mean we all own shares in it? That sounds good to me. And lo and behold, nationalisation comes back. You just call it something nice. They keep doing it. It will never, ever stop. You kind of hope people would wake up to it one day, but its spin works for a reason, unfortunately.
So the subordinate clause construction would be along the lines of, with the Iraq War, I may apologize for faulty intelligence, but I will not... Well, go ahead.
I have to stop you. It wasn't the Iraq War. It was Operation Iraqi Freedom. Just get it right, okay? Just get it right.
So the subordinate clause construction was, I may apologize for faulty intelligence, but I will not apologize for freeing a people so that they can then define their own destiny and find for themselves, blah, 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 blah. So the subordinate clause at the front.
So
the conservatives can do it too.
In that situation.
Yeah, conservatives do it too. Like they polled taxing the rich, which was actually quite popular, but then they changed the semantics and called it death taxes. And then, of course, the public thought, oh, death taxes, that sounds horrible. And it switched the perspective. Yeah. So both sides can do it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
The wordplay is ridiculous. But this is...
But also, it's not taxing the rich, it's paying your fair share.
That's
just want you to get that right. Just want you to get that right, Echo.
What is it? Those with bigger backs can carry the biggest share? I think that's the one. Anyway, let's move on to... Has anyone seen this piece of crap?
I've
seen it, yeah.
Watched it last night.
Can I just ask, before we get into this, I'm just going to say up front, I really struggled to follow this movie. I didn't know what was going on for most of it. And I'm not going to pretend that I'm some sort of insightful genius who always knows what's going on. I was completely fucking lost. Am I alone in that, or was anybody else really confused and found it difficult to follow the plot?
So, ironically, I was watching this last night with my wife, and she was reading a book and had some noise-canceling headphones on. So when she would turn the page, she would look up a little bit, and at the end of the movie, she knew what had happened. Because I think you were, and I'm not trying to be insulting, I think you were actually paying too much attention and trying to follow. And this movie is not meant to be watched that way. This movie is meant to be passively in the background, just sort of on, and look, here's some good guys, and the guy with the bad Irish accent is bad, and I genuinely believe that this is not meant to be watched in the traditional way, because she knew like what was going to happen and she wasn't paying attention because that's how the story was being told.
Why do starship bridges have to look like these gaudy, horrible sets of purple and puce lights where it looks like a nightclub, and there's perspex and plastic, and they're ludicrously huge in this Stygian gloom? It's so horrible to look at.
Here's the funny thing as well, because like the beginning of the movie is largely set in a nightclub, and yet it looks indistinguishable from the bridge of any given starship. It's very little variance in set design going on in Section 31. The basic plot outline, I think, is almost so simple that you end up being distracted by all of the shit they throw in to pad the runtime out, which is what makes it confusing. Also, any story that begins A, in the past, and B, in a mirror dimension is always going to be slightly confusing. But she builds a super weapon when she's the Emperor. Then Star Trek Discovery happens and nobody saw it. So you get the little intro thing about who she was. And then they recruit a team because it's just a heist movie. And then they have to go and they have to find the evil bioweapon, which is being bought there. But then, oh no, the person who was her slave is wanting it. So he takes it. And then you have to go and find it and stop him. And then somehow nobody dies in nobody important dies in this process. Even though it's supposed to be able to wipe out an entire galactic quadrant, and it detonates between two galaxies in an open like wormhole. So you'd think it wiped out an octant of two entire galaxies, but it didn't, because that would be bad. So it's
also,
a bad.
I never figured this out. I was asking myself this question, and it was so distracting. I found it difficult to pay attention to the movie. How and why did Michelle Yeoh move from evil universe ruled by her empire into the other universe where the movie mostly takes place?
That is Star Trek Discovery season 2, I think, or 3, 2 or 3, one of the two. I don't remember the specifics because it is Star Trek Discovery, but they go through into this alt dimension because like Captain Lorca, I think, is the main captain in season 1. Turns out he's evil. He's from the other dimension, and he like wants to be emperor again. She's evil. She's an emperor. She's a genocidal maniac, by the way. I mean, she's wiped out entire civilization. She eats sentient species. She's the most horrible person, which is really funny when you think that the kind of writers who created this, I said this in my video, the kind of writers who think that, you know, misgendering somebody should be a capital offense are fine with redeeming somebody who is a genocidal cannibal. But over the course of that storyline, she sort of comes good because she treated Michael Burnham as her daughter, and then they sort of bond, and then she gets dragged through with them, and then she becomes like an edgy anti-hero sidekick character who just kind of is there to be quippy and Michelle Yeoh.
So, great quality product then. And we're just cratering down towards basically the end of everything. Star Trek and Star Wars and Lord of the Rings. It's all gone. It's all dead. This is the last dregs. It's painful stuff.
Here's a question for you. Which is worse, War of the Rohirrim or Star Trek 31? Because it's interesting. A lot of the time, when you look at movie history, you have that kind of Armageddon Deep Impact coupling of movies where two movies that are very similar come out at the same time. So Emilia Pérez and Joker 2 are both these horrendously awful movies with take the musical genre and just run it through like a razor wire filter. It's just awful. It's these almost, they're like parodies of bad musicals that just nonsensically terrible. So they come out around the same time. You have Star Trek Section 31 and War of the Rohirrim, and I think both those movies represent the absolute nadir or nadir. I don't know how is that pronounced. Is it nadir or nadir? Or nadir? Anyway, the absolute bottom. Right, the total sewer bottom. Because for me, War of the Rohirrim is the worst thing that has ever come out of the Lord of the Rings franchise. I do think it's worse than Rings of Power because I think there's at least a bit of effort behind Rings of Power, although it doesn't really go anywhere. War of the Rohirrim is just shamelessly awful and shamelessly lazy and terrible and derivative and plagiaristic and awful and trite, and I could go on. And Star Trek Section 31 is... I really would struggle to communicate just how fucking awful this movie is. It is an absolute mess. It's postmodern. It's ugly as fuck. The acting is mostly absolutely dreadful. The plot is very difficult to follow. It's just a confused catastrophe. So you have these two once great franchises, and then around the same time, you get these two truly awful movies, which represent just how bad those franchises have become.
I say Section 31 is technically much worse than Rohirrim, just on like a basic coherence, character writing level. Rohirrim does nothing, and occasionally it does bad things. Section 31 is just, to use its own phraseology somehow, it's a chaos goblin. It just, everything is fucking mad. None of it makes sense. All the characters are the worst aspects of Marvel dialogue, but just dialed up to even beyond 11 at this point. We're about like 50. You can just, I do this in my video, every single scene where characters are talking to each other, it's just bickering and quips, and you can just hit fast forward. No information is being conveyed, except that they're all sassy, and that's it. They're insufferable people, whereas with Rohirrim, I can't remember a single line of dialogue from War of the Rohirrim, and that's an improvement.
Yeah. By the way, you're kind of my final arbiter in this, Platoon. Has there been a recent spate of people technically correctly, but also slightly assholishly saying Behemoth as Behemoth?
Oh god, I don't know. I've always,
that's what I picked up on.
I say it as Behemoth, but I know that was Robot Wars, so that's probably wrong. I've heard
that's technically correct.
Oh, is it? Oh, okay.
Yeah. Anyway, I did a poll, by the way, on is it pronounced biopic or biopic, and it was a close run thing. 60% went biopic.
Yeah.
Well,
No, they're wrong. It's biopic.
They're wrong. Yeah, it is
Right.
biopic.
All right. Well, let's move on from this disaster. And Greg, you had
talk
one
about the
more.
incredible fight scenes in this one, because I was blown away by. I mean, Michelle still got it. Like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon was a long time ago.
That's
but
a long time ago. Yeah.
she absolutely nailed those fights. I mean, I was struggling. Like, did they crank the speed up? Was this like a Star Wars Episode 3 situation where she worked so hard at it? And I thought it was sped up, but it wasn't, and it was just that good all by itself. It was incredible. The guy with the mask that you never see ever again, and you don't really even know why he's there except for to steal the box with the MacGuffin inside of it. It was incredible. It was amazing.
I mean, she comes from that tradition of Hong Kong movies, most of which American audiences wouldn't have seen. But she was a terrific, basically, really athlete in her day. She was in Tomorrow Never Dies, which is a Bond movie, which, if some of our viewers want to check that out, she does some fucking amazing choreography in that. It's brilliant to watch. It's very much in that vein of sort of Jackie Chan, where instead of using like 1,000 edits to make a fight scene look convincing, and a lot of the time the camera's showing, it's like an over the shoulder shot, or it's showing you the back because it's a stunt double. No, it's very few cuts, and it shows you everything because it's all done, choreographed by the actor. She was in that same sort of vein, and she was fucking amazing at it in her day. She was the best, probably, female action star of her generation in terms of her fight choreography. She really was a absolute talent in her day, and she still got a lot of that just because of how good she was, in her day.
Yeah, but nobody gave a shit about this movie. It was
It's a shame to see. We see this in everything. It doesn't matter how bad it is. You always see the talent that is being wasted. Like even with Velma, I thought, wow, the animators could actually be working on something good, and instead they have them working on fucking Velma. You always see the talent that is being wasted by Hollywood on their garbage social engineering projects.
She did that Blood Origin thing. Remember that?
Oh god, that's one of the few things I've turned off. I think about 10 minutes into the first episode and never went back. But with this, I'm not even sure where the talent would be in this though, because no one involved, with the exception of Michelle Yeoh, who is eating the scenery.
Sam Richardson is he's a gem, and I will never.
But he just plays himself again and again.
I love
and
it. That's the thing. I love Sam Richardson everywhere he is. I just like him. That's the character that he plays. Always.
He does play himself really well. I'll give him that. There is there's scenes in it where they get stranded on like a trash planet, I think it is, and they fly a garbage hauler, and he's flying it, and he can fly it all the way up until the point at which the movie forgets that he knows what he's doing. And so having flown it off world, gone through warp speed, like used the tractor beams and used the shields, when it comes to ejecting the bomb thing, he's like, oh no, I don't speak the language that this shit runs with, so I don't know which button it is. Like, how the fuck did you get all the way here if you don't speak the language of the ship you've been flying for the last half an hour? What's going on? I don't know where the talent in this movie is.
This is a movie. I got this same thing. I was recently watching this Netflix movie called Uglies. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's dreadful. It's like a sci-fi dystopian movie, and it is
where nobody's all that ugly.
filled. Yeah, it's filled. Basically, the premise is when you turn 16, you get surgery to make you pretty. And it turns out there's a big twist, and the surgery is really lobotomy because they want to control everyone. Wow. And anyway, so basically, sorry if I spoiled it for anybody, but who fucking cares? It's not a movie. So basically, I can't even remember. I'm so fucking distracted by how bad that movie was. I forget my original point.
Oh no!
Forget it. Just move on.
All right,
well,
fine.
I was surprised because I saw him in some of the promo material, or I saw like pictures or whatever, and I thought, oh, like say, what? I didn't know he had any range. Like what? And it's a Star Trek movie, so Sam Richardson is not going to fit in this. Like what will he be doing? And nope, he was playing himself.
He was himself, and he fit
so incongruous
perfectly.
every scene he was in.
The only guy who does that more for me is Sam Rockwell. He's just Sam Rockwell. He always looks like he just wandered into a film set. And he's just okay. I'm just going to be Sam Rockwell.
Oh, no, I remembered my point. It was this. So Uglies is full of plot holes, but they're so obvious that you know the writers caught them, and it's the same as Star Trek Section 31. They know about all these plot holes. They know how bad this is, and they don't care. Yeah. They just don't care. This movie is here to have explosions and to have Michelle Yeoh be a girl boss and to have a black guy in a pilot seat go, oh my god, what did I do? And then the cool in charge woman turns around and says, calm down, get your shit together. Because it takes a woman to put this man losing his shit in his place. They don't care about plot. They don't care about story. They have an agenda. They have certain action sequences they want on scene, and that's it.
It's also not the story they wanted to tell, because I think Section 31 was originally supposed to be an entire season, if not multiple seasons of a streaming show, and they were told no, because look what you did the last time you did that. So they had to condense it into this one movie and try and get all the essential points across. I don't think anybody's heart was particularly in it, but it has reached the point with Star Trek where for the first time ever, I did not put the title of the movie in my video about the movie because I thought it would do better if I didn't say it was Section 31. And that's the nadir to which Section 31 is sunk.
Well, but and to your point about the social engineering and all that, this suffers the same problem that Emilia Pérez suffers, where at the end of the movie, you're thinking, okay, we've been told to side with this genocidal murder, and I didn't see the show, so I don't even know how bad the atrocities are. I just saw the recap, Mission Impossible style, ridiculous recap in the beginning, and I wasn't sure who that message was. It for me, the viewer? Was it supposed to be for the team? I don't even know what that was about, but they're trying to get you to think that this person is cool, but they also continue to remind you that she's responsible for billions of deaths, like horrible, but she's cool, so it's all right. And then at the end of the movie, she's going to sacrifice herself and is going to right the wrongs, and that's going to be it. And the movie says, nope, we yanked her out of there, and she doesn't have to face justice. Nope, this cartel boss that has murdered millions of people, or not millions, thousands and thousands of people, doesn't have to pay for the crimes, doesn't have to face any accountability whatsoever. It's okay if you do bad things. If you just do some feel-good stuff, then it's fine. That's the morality that these folks are working off of, and it's disgusting. And it's also why, like, as a viewer, it makes no sense whatsoever.
All right, well, we must move on because I want to discuss literature. Can you guys think of any authors who have burst out of the literary scene into the cultural zeitgeist and have really captured the public imagination, and people will talk about their books and fiction works around water coolers?
Have you heard about Rebecca Yarros? Let me tell you about this fantastic author and the dragon sex that she writes about. Really, have you heard about Iron Flame? Because
no,
something.
I've heard about this one about, what was it? Master Cthulhu or something, about someone, like this whole tentacled demigod sex genres and stuff like that.
Are we dealing just with fiction here?
Just with fiction.
Okay.
So the latest survey from about a year ago, industry-wide in the US, and it's about diversity in the publishing industry, particularly in fiction. And they came up with their findings and put up the charts. And then they had a long dissertation commentary summary about the state of it. There was one slight tiny elephant in the room, which they didn't even sort of bring up. It was to do with gender. So overall, 71% women in the American fiction publishing industry, literary agents are staggering practically 78% literary agents. And editorial, making all the decisions behind the scenes and working on the texts, coming up on about 3/4 as well. And when you drill into it more, I did the things by race, sexual orientation, and gender. Straight white men would make up, by my estimations, about somewhere around 15% of in the publishing industry in the US. So that's the filter that we're going through now. And it's kind of a problem because the arguments that it's restitutive or restorative, that the pendulum has swung this way now for a while, it's just not good. Like in terms of emotional maturity, it's not a good perspective. No. Plus, if you take the idea that back then the culture as a whole, wider, was more male chauvinist and less so now, but you're still trying to take the idea of a pendulum swift being okay or au fait or cool, is also not good. And also you need male proclivities in literature. You need to go into the sordid, into the lurid, into the gratuitous, into the illicit. You need to puncture into those things. And you need contrasts, like in Cormac McCarthy, between the Baroque and the beautiful literary and the Gothic violence and extremism of human identities and nature. And you need stories that are about technology and atomization and estrangement that you can get. And you need all these kind of things, which are just kind of missing. And so a typical book I just chose for you guys at random, here's the premise. So the city changes its face, has a doubled and entwined time scheme. It is the 1990s North London, an area dirtier and poorer than it is now. The lovers, Eli, the teenage drama student, and Stephen, the established actor with a traumatic past, have been living together. Something awful has happened. In the sections headed now, they are having an agonized conversation about that event. They move from pleas and accusations to a row, then to a thrown jar of piccalilli and bloodshed, followed by penitence and confessions, and at last a reconciliation. The book-long conversation is interspersed with retrospective sections headed first summer, second winter, and so on, in which we are shown in scattered episodes how they arrived at this point. As the two narratives converge on the awful event, its nature is gradually revealed. The event is easily guessed, but there is more to it, the final twist having as much to do with McBride's narrative form as it does with the story. In other words, a book about nothing. So Greg, in your leisure time, do you want to sit down with an improving volume about boring people dealing with their trauma?
It doesn't sound super exciting. That's why I read the Dragon Sex. No, I don't even read that. No, that's it. I agree with you that it's partially a gender issue. And then there's also, it's compounded by right now, especially in fiction, a lot of influencers, like online influencers, are driving a lot of this. And so I was only half joking about the Yaros, the Sarah J. Maas, the I can't think of those are the two that have just come to mind, but TikTok for books, Book Talk, they promote this kind of stuff because it is there's sort of a through line with a lot of this, these Oscars, this second screen, Star Trek 31. You would ask me about a video game, which I've got an example of this. There's a lot of, I recently heard this term called second screen content. And apparently Netflix has been actually trying to do this on
amazing.
Purpose.
Wow.
That they want things that you can watch on the big screen without fully paying attention while you have your small screen in your hand. And it's not engaging enough to really grab your attention, but not so boring that you unsubscribe from their service. And the world of literature has this, and it's trash romantasy novels. It's trash romance YA novels. And I hate to come off as the old man yelling at cloud, but even the YA novels when I was younger, like Maze Runner is not fine, amazing literature, but it's not absolute garbage trash. It has interesting prose. There's a somewhat interesting concept going on there. Yeah, it's teenagers in a dystopia. There was a time where, by God, we just loved dystopian YA novels. Just fucking loved them. But that's still
so many films with a teenage male protagonist wearing like a red sweater with like a red hood. That was like the iconic image for about 5 years.
Yeah, I mean we go through phases, and there was the vampire phase for a while. But my wife reads a lot more than I do, and she likes fantasy. And she was just telling me before the show that I think last year she read 50 fantasy books, and she said, I mean, maybe maybe a handful of them she actually remembers. They actually stuck in her mind. And these are like popular ones. So she's not just grabbing random ones from the store. These, you know, she watches folks online, and not, you know, dumb 21-year-old book talk folks, but YouTube personalities that she trusts for okay recommendations. And she said none of them are like horrible, but they're passive content. They're just, you read them and they're all right, and then they don't really stick with you. And not everything needs to be Catcher in the Rye or whatever, but it's a lot of fiction it's trash and it's smut, and that's what's driving a lot of it. And I don't think it's a good direction, especially for fans.
Platoon,
You know,
I read the book sections in The Spectator and The Guardian, and I might as well be on two different planets. I was wondering what you thought of these statistics, and whether or not you feel that male proclivities are important in literature for those reasons that I kind of laid out.
Yes. And it's always, but it's one of those chicken egg scenarios, really, in that it is undoubtedly true that men and women like and write different types of thing. And you would expect, therefore, that if one gender is predominant amongst, say, literary agents, that the amount that's being churned out will cater to one and not to the other. It is interesting, though, and I've never really looked into the statistics as to how much time different genders spend reading. Do men actually spend? And then again, if men spend less time reading than women do, is that because we aren't turning out things that men want to read anymore? Or have we gone the other way, where literature has become dominated by women because women have always been the target audience for the majority of the type of smart books that Greg so eloquently describes? So I'm not sure how much of this is causative and how much of it is just an effect of a market, and the fact that men will read specific and probably a smaller niche genre of things. If you go on the tube in London, if you do see a guy reading and he's not on his phone, it's probably going to be some SAS Andy McNabb type. You know, I've never read one, but they're very popular amongst men of a certain age in particular. The downside is that then it does become self-perpetuating, because of course the more women are biased in favor of their own tastes, the less will be produced for men. And so even if there is a causative reason that men read less anyway, fewer men will read. And importantly, fewer young men and young boys in particular will be interested in reading, because the stories for them, adventure stories, which typically women aren't as interested in as men are, you won't get another Treasure Island type situation, which, you know, kicks off so many people's imagination and spawns an entire, you know, genre of that kind of romantic adventure story. So in the nice world, you'd be able to say, well, if men want to redress the balance, why don't men set up their own literary agencies, which only accept works from male novels? You would probably be sued if you tried it, but you know, maybe in America you'll have more luck.
I'm sure the UK government would have something to say to me if I said, okay, I'm going to set up an all-male literary agency. We're only going to publish male authors, and we're only going to have male editors. No, in the UK, if women did that, it would be celebrated. The Guardian would probably give them an award. But in the UK, the British government would have the police kick down your door on the first day.
Well, the circumstances for men are worse now in terms of statistics across the board than it was for women when they felt the need to bandy together to create the Orange Prize for fiction. You're right that men are complicit because they don't read enough, because they're being slightly lazy and they're falling behind in that sense. But there's also untapped energy there waiting to be tapped. Like, there was a time when people would read Trainspotting in the pub because it was exciting, and to have that book was cool, and to talk about it was cool. Fight Club and things like that. If you had that in your backpack on a college campus, it was cool. So there is that potential latent there. And there's also, I go down to the student high school writing competitions. Boys instinctively feel that they can't write about the things that at a visceral level are exciting to them, that they want to talk about and write about, because they think that's not going to fly in the very kind of prim, empowering and kind of PG rated structures of those competitions. Whereas the girls, slightly more on balance, can write about the things that appeal deeply to them at a visceral level. And writing being subjective, you need that energy of things that really correlate to what fires you and sparks you up. So there is a slight disparity there too, because a lot of those teenagers are doing their A-levels where they're reading Atonement or books like that, which are full of, you know, gratuitous, well, not gratuitous, but sex and that kind of content anyway. So there's a slight disconnect there as well. So those are my thoughts on that. Yeah. Well,
Platoon's
it's
right. There's some disconnect, but that men just aren't. I don't think a lot of guys are into fiction as much, and some of that is just it's a cultural deal. I mean, a lot of guys like to read nonfiction. Like every dude wants to read 47 Laws of Power because that's the cool thing to read. And I mean, I think guys are more into sci-fi. I mean, as a matter of fact, I've got Heir to the Empire back there. I'm halfway through that, and it's fucking great, by the way. I totally understand why everybody's super excited. They were excited to see Thrawn on screen because that book fucking slaps so far. And canonically, Luke Skywalker loves hot chocolate, and I think that's a fun little nugget that they tossed in there. But I part of the issue with the new romanticy smut trend is that fantasy, there was, like, almost every book has smut now, and I'm not saying that as a joking. Like, almost every fantasy book has a fucking smut scene somewhere in it, and oftentimes it comes out of nowhere. And fantasy used to be that adventure. That was the thing, right? Every dude, ironically or not, loves Lord of the Rings. I talk up Wheel of Time whenever I can. I think all guys should read Wheel of Time. It's fantastic. There are 3 big main characters, and they represent 3 kind of archetypes that a lot of men fit into. They go through some struggles that a lot of men go into. One character won't. He has to be the statue, the strong, no one can help me, and then almost ruins everything before he finally realizes that he can't actually be that because it's not serving it. Lots of really interesting themes there. But those adventures and those explorations, they do happen in fiction. And some of it is a cultural thing, and some of it is, I don't know. I think some guys lately just, I think somebody in the chat was talking about a lot of guys have moved on to getting their storytelling in video games, not so much reading anymore. And so now the whole, especially, like I said, the fantasy genre it's become romantasy, almost all of it. There's not a lot of Terry Pratchett left. There's not a lot of, what was the book that somebody recommended? Maslin? Something to that effect. There's not Lord of the Rings happening anymore. They're few and far.
Neil Gaiman has taken an unaccountable plunge. In reader, I don't know what's happened there.
My daughter's reading Strange. Oh, what was not Strange? Good and Evil. What was the one that Amazon did the show? Why can't I think of the name of it?
Oh, Good Omens?
Yeah, Good Omens. She's reading at the moment, and I don't want to tell her anything about Neil at the moment because she's loving that book.
Yeah. I'd almost be interested to see that, because on the point of it being a cultural thing, so we've got the front statistics for women in literary agencies and such, but I do think a lot of it probably has to do with the fact that primary school education is so heavily skewed toward women. So like most kids' first introduction to what writing is and what the point of reading books is and what stories are is going to be young and at school, where you're going to be assigned specific texts and you're going to receive opinions from your teachers when you're in creative writing. If you come as like a young man in a predominantly female teaching profession and you say, I've written a little adventure story about, if I could take Mortal Engines as a premise, giant cities that run around the world eating each other. I suspect if you wrote that premise as a kid and you handed it to your English teacher, who is a woman, she'll say, well, that's childish, and why don't you consider instead reading something more mature? And that mature thing will be something like the excerpt we've seeing on our screen right now, a story about, well, a domestic argument couched in a technical exercise, which is not going to excite many young men. So like, I suspect that has a lot to do with the cultural trend. And of course, gaming has the advantage of it just being naturally a more competitive and involving space, which I think just appeals to men more. So you'll probably never get a 50-50 balance in interest between the genders in literature, but you could have a more healthy balance than the one we currently have. And I think addressing people's early inspirations and the early feedback they get and what stories they're told are acceptable is a great place to start doing that. But to do that, you will need, again, to redress balances in teaching and then later on in literary agencies and all the rest.
I have a question for Echo. Echo, I have a question for you. So, I mean, you're in this sort of literary world. That's your sphere. And let me ask you this regarding the excerpt that we're currently looking at. So this is a book about 2 people in a room having a heated conversation, essentially, and that's the entire book. Do you think there's an element of Emperor's New Clothes about this? Do the editors and the award givers and the critics have to pretend that they enjoy this utterly mind-numbing shite just so that they are accepted and given a pat on the back by their fashionable social set? or do they fear coming out and saying, look, this thing is a pile of boring, pretentious twaddle. This is just tripe. No one in the right mind. This is so boring. But can they not say that because they fear they fear being sort of outcast from the social side and being regarded as something of a Philistine and a sort of literary populist? Do you think there's an element to that? But no one actually enjoys this.
Bit of Abilene paradox in there, maybe. Yeah, but I don't know. Trauma certainly has a disproportionate focus and emphasis.
You wouldn't want to be lowbrow.
Yeah. But anyway, it's been a minute, so I think it's time we played.
See, I'm the best, man. I did it.
All right. Well, you know the rules. It's very simple. Is it a song on the American music charts, or is it a bunch of gobbledygook that I've made up? So, everyone ready? Platoon, you're all set?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, here it comes. Right. Well, your first entry is Dumb Crazy by So Super and Trey Loaded and Big Boogie.
Ooh, I almost want to say that I think Trey Loaded sounds familiar, but I'm going to say that this is you, not a real thing.
Second that. It's made up. We're starting off fake.
I think this is fake because I imagine that the word boogie is a little bit too retro for the kids these days. They're going to come up with something a bit more modern than boogie. Boogie just sounds old. And there's no weird characters, and there's two ands. I'm not sure they would do that. It would be more like So Super and Trey Loaded featuring Big Boogie. I think that would be a bit more accurate. I'd be surprised if this was real.
All right. Well, you guys have got some serious ring rust because this is a real entry.
No.
God damn. That was a good one. That was a good start.
That was solid.
Okay. Despot Tonto by Piedra Angular ex Casey Rocker, Sean Bailey, and Future.
Oh, fuck it. I just say it's real because I'm going to get all these all wrong anyway, so I may as well just come out the gate. It just feels real.
I'm saying fake because I think Sean Bailey was a candidate for Mayor of London. I don't think he's a musician, so I'm going to go with fake.
I mean, Future's a real artist, but sometimes I wonder if Echo would ever think he's making up an artist that turns out to be real accidentally. I'm going real, though.
Well, Despot Tonto translates as fool's despot. So this is a fake one that I made up.
Well done.
He did it. Future's real. That's a real dude.
Yeah, I must have accidentally done a real guy. Okay. Right, next one. Pour Me Mexico by Lefty SMX Santa Fe Clan featuring Darius, Sican, MC Davo, and Neto Pena.
Do you know what the crazy thing is? Your immediate reaction is, okay, this must be fake. But the thing is, it absolutely could be real. That's how fucking ridiculous of the nomenclature. What's the word I'm looking for?
Nomenclature. Yeah, that's nice.
The nomenclature of modern pop music has become. It's a mess. Like, Jesus Christ, man, just call yourself the Walkies and release a song called "She Loves It" or something. Christ. Oh, fuck it. I don't know. It's real. There you go. Guys?
Real. I don't know. No, wait. No, I got to be, no. Because the last two I sided with you and you're wrong all the time. It's fake. This one's fake. I'm going opposite of you.
I mean, only on the basis that I don't think I would have the energy to make up so many bullshit sounding names. I'm going to say it's real.
All right. Well, in your own weird, twisted ways, yeah, you eventually got there. This is a real entry in the American music charts, which takes us on to Dirty Cash by
right
Pausa and the Adventures of Stevie V. Dirty Cash by Pausa and the Adventures of Stevie V.
I don't. Nobody can be the Adventures of. That's not a band. That's not real.
It feels fake to me because I think again Stevie feels like a bit of an older name, and it's too clean. Dirty Cash, obviously that's the name of the song. Pausa and the Adventures of Stevie V. That's the name of the group or the name of the individual and the person who's featuring. there's no confusion as to which one is the song and which one is the name. So I feel it's almost too clean and it has to be fake.
I'm gonna go with real for the opposite reasons.
Greg, what did you deciding on?
It's fake.
Stone coin.
I'm gonna go with fake. I don't even know. I could talk myself out of it. It's fake.
Well, I'm sorry, Greg, but Dirty Cash by Pauser and the Adventures of Stevie V is real.
I think I'm 0 for 4 this time.
You might be, yeah.
Oh
It's,
my
not
goodness.
doing well there. Okay. Come Inside by Arlo McManus.
That sounds very. That sounds like something they would make that an artist would actually do, unironically.
Because Greg has been wrong 4 times in a row, I think I've been right once. I'm going to agree with him just on the basis that mathematically his chances of being wrong 5 times in a row are so small that surely he's right on this one.
Surely.
Yeah. So this is real, right, Greg?
I think it's real.
Okay, I'm gonna go with that.
Those degenerates would really do it. I mean, it's been going on since the 80s when Kiss did "Lick It Up," so it's not a new phenomenon. But they think it's edgy. So
Also, I think Arlo McManus, the juxtaposition of this kind of new age name with an old name, McManus, is very much what the kids would be into doing. Like they definitely do that. Like I don't know, Starro McGuinness. I could see that being a name.
don't
what I
say
mean?
the kids.
Whatever the fuck they're calling
Do
themselves
that.
these days. The Gen Alphas. I don't know. I don't listen to this. I haven't listened to
The
this much
hippity
in
hops.
years.
I'm gonna say that it is way too convenient that a title like "Come Inside" is written by a man with anus in his name. So I'm going with fake.
Subliminal.
Well, Greg and Despot collectively crash and burn because this is one I made up.
Oh,
Greg, what are
How?
you doing to me, man?
well, see,
5
this is
in a row.
It's a psyop because I know them so well that I could only get 0.
You know what
if I
you're like?
actually
You know what you're like, Greg?
knew
You
them all.
remind me of a novice boxer, right? They go into the ring, and instead of just letting the fight come to them, they overthink everything, and they're throwing too many punches, and they're panicking, and they're
Haymakers
trying
everywhere.
to catch their opponent. And it's like, relax, man. Just let the fight come to you. You know,
Let it
don't
flow. Come
chase it.
inside.
Yeah.
All right. Uh-oh by Zeddy Will.
That feels real.
Real?
Feels real to me.
Now I'm
Uh-oh,
overthinking
is
how
that he
much
will?
I'm overthinking it.
Greg is just completely.
He's gone.
He's lost. He's gone.
Yeah.
He,
I need to embrace.
if he doesn't think about it too much, then he's going to worry that it's too simple and he's going to get caught out
That's the
by the
problem.
trap, and then he can't help but overthink this now. You've
I need
beaten
to
him, Echo. Well
embrace
done.
Chaos.
You've utterly destroyed Greg.
Broken
Chaos
up.
is my friend.
yeah.
I'm a chaos goblin.
I'd say this is real though.
Yeah.
Greg, bear in mind it's a 50-50 proposition, all right? Just relax.
If it's even, it's real. Well, it's real.
Okay, well, back on solid ground there, because yes, this is an actual entry.
Yeah, RNG.
Chaz.
Got it.
And your last entry is Dramamine by Flawed Mangoes.
No, I can't think about it. No.
I have no idea. Usually I get a sense of whether it's real or fake when I look at it, but this one I'm just drawing a complete fucking blank.
RNGs, this is even. It's real.
I love the misspelling of Is that a misspelling of mangoes? That is. So I like the misspelling.
Whoa, you got to be careful with the
Dramamine.
E on the end there, Mr. Vice President. You got to be. That'll fuck you up every time.
That's an obscure reference, but I got it.
Hey, yeah.
Deep cut. All right. Well, Platoon, which way are you leaning?
See, Dramamine sounds real and Flawed Mangoes doesn't. So I'm going to say real.
Despot, I must have an answer.
Flawed mangoes. It doesn't. Flawed. I don't think
No,
flawed
you're
is the
the
word
one
they would
overthinking
use.
it.
I don't think they would use the word flawed. I'm gonna say fake.
Greg, your last chance.
RNG was even. It's real.
Okay. Yes, this is an actual entry in the American music charts.
Yes.
Dramamine by Flawed Mangoes.
Should have done this earlier.
Dreadful stuff.
Well, which of these would you like me to put on the screen, Despot? You got 3 options for me here. Which would you like to start with?
Well, let's start
One
off
Love?
with the old biopics.
Is that the one which has the one love in it? There must be this one, I'd suppose.
Yeah, okay, so basically, this section is titled "Biopics Must Die." So this genre is just it's rotten, it's wretched. It was popular in the sort of 90s and early 2000s. Then it went away for a while, and Bohemian Rhapsody came out, and it was dreadful, and it made $1 billion. And Rami Malek's Razzie performance as Freddie Mercury won an Oscar, and that sort of brought the genre back. And so you've got a lot of this shit coming out that was, in many cases, it was actually greenlit in and around the time of Bohemian Rhapsody, and now a lot of this stuff's coming out, and it's just awful. It's all fucking terrible. And so I wanted to go through this, and we're going to look at some of the older biopics and give our thoughts on the upcoming biopics and our expectations for them. So Bob Marley One Love was dreadful. This is a whitewashed version of Bob Marley. The guy had, I think, 13 kids by 11 women officially. And this movie makes out that he was a married man and that he was monogamous. It's just a complete whitewash of the guy. It's awful. It tries to construct a narrative around his early career and then his going to London to make exits, and it doesn't really work. And they try to throw some fake drama in there with his wife. It's a really bad movie, and it's really boring. Just dreadful. Although the guy, I can't remember his name, who plays Bob Marley, he's pretty good. Let's move on.
Yeah, right. There's nothing worse than just a conventional, acceptable, rote, standard biopic. Those are the ones I hate the most. Oh my God.
I know. I'm going to let Akko talk about this one because I know he's a big fan of Maestro.
This was a absolute nightmare of pretension, overwrought nonsense of trying to reach to some epic height of class and sophistication and pedigree, and being so terrible. He got the voice going, which I thought was pretty good, but otherwise, the only good thing about this is that the low-grade resolution means I don't have to focus on it too much.
Yeah, I mean, Carrie Mulligan she doesn't play a character. She just plays a series of stock emotions. So in one scene, she's angry, and in another scene, she's in love, and it never coheres into a character. It's not a dreadful performance because there's no direction for her characters, but it's almost bizarre. It is one of the most disgustingly pretentious, overwrought movies. If you want to know what overwrought means, watch this movie. This is a massively overwrought movie.
And overweening, if you want to know what overweening means. This is what's
it's a director who does not have the talent to bring his vision to life, who is massively overcompensating for his lack of vision. It's just dreadful.
Yeah, I know it was a Family Guy quote, but this one really is the definition of it insists upon itself, and it's fucking terrible.
Platoon, do let us know if you've seen any of these.
It's a biopic, so the odds of that happening are close to zero, but I will do my best.
All right, let's have the next one.
Maestro is good because it's on Netflix, and that one has a speed slider. That's how you know Netflix knows that their shit is terrible. That they're one of the only streamers that has a speed. You can go up to 1.5 speed, and that's how I watched that one. That's how I was able to watch that one.
All right, so to give an indication of what a pile of shite this is, so this is the Amy Winehouse movie. This came out last year, and at the end of the movie, it says it ends, and then the text comes up, and the text says something like Amy Winehouse died of alcohol poisoning after a long period of sobriety, and that didn't sound right to me. So I went and I did my research. Amy Winehouse was drunk on stage a month before she died. She went and did a performance in Serbia, right? And she was so fucking drunk that she spent 30 minutes introducing her band, and people started walking out in large numbers. It was an absolute catastrophe, and she had to cancel the tour. Then she died a month later. And then it says she had a long period of sobriety. It's like, what the fuck are you talking about, man? No, she didn't. So it also depicts her as this amazing performer when in fact she was quite a bad performer. She was drunk a lot of the time. She would go out hammered. I saw her. I heard her live at a thing called the Tea Festival in Belfast. I was working there. Didn't fucking pay for it. And she was drunk. It was a pretty bad show. None of this makes it into the movie. It's just all the musical performances are shown as amazing. There's some nice character drama. I will say that the guy who plays her husband is terrific. He's a really good actor. And the girl who plays Amy Winehouse is also quite good. But it's a very dull, sad, one-note movie, which, although it depicts her in a somewhat negative light, it still manages to find a way to kind of whitewash her, especially with regard to her musical performances. It's quite bad. It's certainly not the worst among these movies, because there's some nice scenes, like the scene where she meets her husband is actually quite good. It doesn't go on too long, but it's also not too short and summary, and it does get to the sort of emotional depths that they're trying to explore in parts. So while it's certainly not the worst movie, it is ultimately quite disappointing and a bit shit.
It resides in an interesting place because it's very close to contemporary culture and contemporary media and the contemporary landscape for this kind of fatal flaw, brilliant iconoclastic musicians that we associate with these biopics. So it resides in a very kind of close space to where we actually are. It's quite interesting. But yeah, another just bland effort.
Yeah. All right, let's cover the next one. None of us have seen this. This is unwatchable. It's not on in any of my local cinemas.
Yeah.
So I haven't seen it. It looks like Austin. It looks like awards bait. It could be brilliant. I don't know.
Well, I expressed my feelings about this because Bob Dylan, in that era of 3 or 4 years in the 60s, resides in a very rarefied space in my imagination and cultural conception. And I don't want to see a bland James Mangold directed biopic smush its way into that and give it imagery and a feel that's not going to match that period where Dylan was the cynosure of hip. So that's where I stand on this.
All right. Well, let's have the next.
I think this one's going to be overall like Maestro. I think because people are going to try to recreate that feeling, and it's going to be horrible because you can't recreate that, but they'll try, and it's going to be god awful and awards bait.
Okay, so Regan is it's up for worst movie at the Razzies.
Oh, really?
It's one of 5 nominated, yeah, and it absolutely deserves it. This movie is fucking terrible. Now, if you go on to Rotten Tomatoes, it has a 17% critic score and a 95% audience score. And what we got here was the opposite of review bombing. So basically, the critics were quite happy to criticize it because obviously they hate Regan because he's a right-wing political figure and he's a conservative hero. So they were really happy to stick the boot into this movie. But here's the thing. The critics were right. This movie is dreadful. But the audience, the Reganites and the people who love Regan were so angry that the critics, they felt that this was just another example of those horrible left-wing critics dumping on something for political reasons. And so they rushed into Rotten Tomatoes and reviews shilled it. The opposite of review bombing. And Regan is just nightmarishly awful. It's awful in so many ways. There's a scene where Regan is standing in a graveyard, and it's him and his first wife at the grave of their child who was sadly died on the day it was born. Very, very sad. And the graveyard is a fucking green screen, and it's so obvious. And it's really distracting because the movie wants you to feel this emotion, but you're distracted by this hideous green screen graveyard. There's another scene where he's in a suburb talking to his mother. It's a green screen. He's walking to a helicopter in the White House lawn. It's a green screen. He's at his ranch. It's so much of this movie is just like really bad green screen because they couldn't be bothered doing location shoots. It's so fucking lazy. The dialogue, Jesus Christ, this chat GPT dialogue. There's a scene where he's on a date with his second wife, his last wife, Nancy, his great love. And she turns around and she says, "What do you want out of life anyway?" It's the most trite shit. The movie ends with him walking off on a horse while Country Roads. What's that?
Oh, really?
Called?
That's amazing.
Yeah. Country Roads is playing and he's walking off on his horse, and it's got this sort of Wikipedia page format where this part of his life, and then there's this anecdote, and then there's this funny quip that he made once, and there's this funny joke that he made once, and then this part, and this part, and this part. The Iran-Contra scandal is just kind of brushed over. This is one of, just the absolute depths of presidential moral depravity, basically helping these organizations which went on to commit horrifying crimes against humanity, the drug cartels, which Reagan set up with the CIA so that they could buy weapons from his administration and fund his war effort in Afghanistan. Just horrifying.
But think of the cause and effect. One of those cartel leaders did eventually change their gender and alter their life, so it all worked out in the end. There's a huge debate raging in the chat because I'm torn on this, Despot, because technically Reagan is an Irish name, but you're pronouncing it Regan, I think. Yeah.
Reagan.
Well, in Ireland, we say Regan.
Ah, well, there you go.
It's Ronald Reagan.
Well, the Americans say Reagan, but he was an Irishman, so I'm calling him Regan. But again, yeah, moral whitewashing, the whole Iran-Contra scandal. It's more, they take the Iran-Contra scandal and they don't treat it as a moral catastrophe. They don't say, okay, this was really horrifying stuff. They treat it as more like bad optics that he had to deal with in his administration, and it's just disgusting.
Wait, are you suggesting that the CIA would actively work with people that don't have America? They would set up false and then try to sell weapons or drugs or something.
I hate to be the one to break it to you, Greg, but the CIA do not have the best interests of the American people at heart. They've done
Unbelievable.
They've done
Hot take.
It's an American agency. That doesn't make any sense. They're keeping track of our enemies. They're protecting us. That doesn't no.
Finally, my channel has an exclusive. Finally.
It's annoying that they did not choose to focus on that. I mean, it is such a fascinating period. I think the defense they even used for Reagan at the time was that, well, he's quite old and he's not entirely across everything his administration does. I remember the watching. I don't remember. I wasn't alive, but I've seen the speech when he sacks. Is it Norman Baker? And Reagan basically sits in front of the television and says, "As president, of course, the buck stops with me, and that is why I fired the person responsible."
Beautiful.
And this is one of the movies where the acting does not compensate. So thus far, the actors have been pretty good. The actors in this are fucking awful. It's a very low effort, very caricaturish portrayal, and it's very one note. You don't get any sort of differentiation of personality development over the decades, which is natural for human beings. It's the same voice, the same look, the same everything. It's fucking awful, guys. If you want to see like the absolute depths of biopics, watch 10 minutes of this. I'm a big Razzies fan because the Razzies always get it right. The Razzies was criticized for not nominating Emilia Pérez. Guys, it was the same with all of our channels. None of us were aware of Emilia Pérez, right? I didn't even have it in my 12 worst movies of the year video because I didn't know it existed. Same with the Razzies voters. They had no idea what the hell Emilia Pérez was until it won a Golden Globe. So Razzies were 100% right to nominate this movie. It's maybe one of the worst biopics I've ever seen in my life.
It's a shame as well because there's a couple of periods of his life which you could choose to focus on because he did have this fascinating story of the liberal Hollywood doyen who leaves that the established club and loses lots of his friends because he is rightly, I think, concerned about communist infiltration in Hollywood, takes a massive stand against that. The person who redeems Goldwater basically, by being the electable face of conservatism, proving that you can actually get right of center politics through in a country which has only recently elected Jimmy Carter because they were in some sort of, I don't even want to know what was going through Americans' head. I guess he wasn't the other guy. That helps. So that would be a really interesting one. You would never get that story though, because Hollywood would not like to tell that story about itself as much as anything like that. But or the Iran-Contra story, like properly delving into that if you wanted to go in the other direction. But he was a pivotal president and deserves to be, I think, treated a little bit more intellectually than it sounds like they did.
They did do the Hollywood communist infiltration story. That was probably the first quarter of the movie, certainly the first act. And the problem with that is it's treated in a very caricaturish manner. He's depicted as this great heroic crusader coming in to save Hollywood from these scheming communists. It's too cartoonish, and it doesn't look like a serious examination. It looks more like right-wing propaganda. That's how it comes off. Mm-hmm. And that's a real lost opportunity because there really was serious communist infiltration at the time. And Reagan was an important figure, but it just comes off as cheap propaganda. In this movie, it doesn't look serious, and it's done in that Wikipedia page format where they're not going into enough depth on any of it. It's just little snippets and bits and pieces as they fast forward through his life. Mm-hmm. A period like that would require its own movie, and you just cannot do it justice with a quarter of a 2-hour biopic.
So kind of a hagiography, if that's how I pronounce it?
Yeah, it's essentially a hagiography, yeah, or hagiography. The Apprentice is probably one of the better one of these. This is the Trump movie. So you've got Sebastian Stan plays Trump, and Jeremy Strong plays Trump's closet gay lawyer. And they're both excellent. Jeremy Strong in particular is brilliant in this. The first act is definitely the strongest because it's just examining Trump's rise in real estate in the 1970s. It goes from when he's a struggling sort of workman-like landlord and his rise into a kind of tycoon. That part's brilliant. The first act of this movie is brilliant. It gets progressively worse into the third act, but even in the third act, which is the worst, it still has a lot of interesting redeeming features. It comes off at times as a hit job, as an anti-Trump hit job, and admittedly, a lot of right-wingers and conservatives treated the movie like that, and they said, this is just anti-Trump propaganda, and it's a piece of shit, we should all hate it. And as tempting as that interpretation is, I think that doesn't give the movie due credit for some of the good stuff that it does. The problem is it just doesn't hold together very well, because it drifts toward that Wikipedia page format where it's kind of it takes very important parts of his life and it only gives snippets of them, and it leaves these big questions, like he's building this big casino in Atlantic City, and it shows you the struggles that he had building it, but then it forgets about it. We don't figure out what happened. Turns out that was a big disaster for him. The casino went out of business, but we don't learn that because the movie's too busy with other things. But I don't think it's a hit job. It certainly doesn't depict him in a particularly positive light, but it does show some of his more admirable traits, which you absolutely need to have to get to where he got in the world. Like his almost absurd drive and ambition, his utter refusal to rest, things like that. And it gets into some of his more weird idiosyncratic personality quirks, like he doesn't do exercise because he thinks of the human body as a battery. It's weird, but it's kind of, they do it in a really funny way. That's actually a really funny scene. But I can actually recommend watching this movie just for the first act and for Jeremy Strong's performance, if nothing else. All right, so we're gonna look now. We're gonna go to the panels. So I want all of your opinion, boys, at the new biopics. Can you bring in new biopics, Echo?
I think it's this one.
All right, so these are the upcoming ones. We have, and again, I think a lot of this comes from the success of Bohemian Rhapsody, which was just a curse. So you got Shailene Woodley as Janis Joplin.
I do not know who either of those people are.
Yeah, same here.
Don't know who Janis Joplin is.
I know she gave Leonard Cohen a blowjob in the Chelsea Hotel, and that's all I know about her.
Come on, take another little piece of my heart now.
Oh,
baby.
I know that song.
She's in the 27 Club, right?
Yeah, she had a screaming, raspy, bluesy voice. And,
Bobby McGee is honestly, no shit. That's a great fucking song. She had an interesting bluesy voice. It was nice.
This could be good, but it's all entirely dependent on the voice, which is the whole point of her. Plus, she's got a scrappy. She was Texas originally, but then went to California, lesbianish a little bit, and the whole hippie drug scene. I think this could be good. This could be fun.
I would be interested to see who they have playing Leonard Cohen, because surely they're going to have Leonard Cohen in it because he had something of a passing relationship with her. It'd be interesting to see who they get to play him.
If they do it in kind of a 70s drug fueled sort of spiral chaos kind of way, sort of like in Forrest Gump, the part of the movie where his girlfriend was just spiraling out in that time and everything was very crazy. If the movie sort of amps things up as she leans more into it and it gets crazier and crazier and crazier, it could be at least a good time.
Yeah, but they'll get that late 60s, early 70s aesthetic. It'll be too glossy, too clean.
Yeah.
That's the only problem.
It'll be like how they do the 80s, is everything very, very pastel and bright and windbreakers, and really it was just fucking brown. It was very fucking brown in the 80s. Yeah. Wood paneling. There was lots of wood paneling.
Let's try another one here. Tom Holland as Fred Astaire. Yeah, I could see that. That could work quite nicely.
Who's Fred Astaire?
The famous the dancer. He was a fixture in American TV screens as an elegant ballroom dancer who would swish and cavort around the screens with his beautiful dance routines, and then fetch up in films, musical films, where he would click his heels and cavort around the scenery.
Is there a particularly dramatic element to his life? Like, was he
none whatsoever? So I don't know what they.
It sounds very sterile. Like, if he was like a drug addict and a closet homosexual at a time when that maybe ended his career, that might have been something, but it's like, if not, it just sounds like a very dull exercise in mediocrity.
Wouldn't they have got the other Spider-Man guy? Wouldn't he have been better?
Who? Andrew Garfield?
Yeah, wouldn't he have been better?
He would have been better, actually, by the looks of it, yeah, by the sounds of it.
Because he had that musical thing anyway. So yeah, this could be good. Paul
Here's an
Mescal
interesting
is Paul McCartney. No, don't do anything Beatles. You're never going to get close enough. You're going to get a modern gen, whatever it is, slightly pussyish, wimpyish aesthetic onto lads from a different time from Liverpool. That's not going to be authentic and real.
Also, haven't
It's
we
not
had
gonna
loads of Beatles biopics
Yeah,
already?
that's too much.
Do we need
So
more?
many.
And Paul McCartney's still alive. He's not even there. At least let him go cold first.
Yeah. So I don't like this at all. Leave the Fabs.
They're actually making 4 Beatles biopics, one for each of the Beatles, and
Oh, God.
Yeah, I know. What a
each
pointless
movie
exercise.
will be the Beatles told from a different perspective. It's fucking pointless. Look, if you want to do the Beatles, you have to do Tune In All These Years. I can't remember the name of the author, actually. Let me briefly look it up, because it's an amazing book.
Do they
One of
all
the best-
combine at the end into a Beatles cinematic universe? And it's just, the Beatles assemble.
Mark Lewison, Tune In All These Years. It's an amazing book. It's about the Beatles' early years right up to the 1960s. He's working on the follow-up at the minute. He's been working on it for years. But just do a fucking TV show if you want to do the Beatles, and do them proper justice. You cannot do the story, the incredible story of the fucking Beatles in a movie. You can do a little bit of it. You could maybe do the Bigger Than Jesus scandal as a movie. You could do the breakup maybe as a movie. From sort of when John Lennon starts dating Yoko Ono to when they break up. By the way, it was John Lennon who broke up the Beatles.
The build up to
Yoko Ono was
Sgt.
just
Pepper's and its release, that'd be great.
Yeah, Yoko Ono
He
wasn't
didn't
really
follow
a
bro
husband
code. It's
star.
ridiculous.
What was I going to say about
Somebody
this?
brought up Walk Hard earlier, and I think the best depiction of the Beatles on screen was in that movie. It was really fantastic.
Oh fuck! Did anybody see the Beatles in Doctor Who? That was bad.
God, that was excruciating.
Disgusting.
It was. It was disgusting. They were even wearing, like, Paul was wearing glasses. Strange stuff.
Fuck! It was grim, and the hair was so wrong. It was more like it wasn't a Beatles cut. It was a bowl cut. It was fucking hideous.
Yeah, terrible stuff. Anyway, Selena Gomez is Linda Ronstadt. No, she's too cupcake. Linda Ronstadt, I don't know. Man, these are obscure characters from.
Well, that's the thing. They've run out of like they've done Elton John. They've done the Beatles have been done a million times. They have done Queen. They've done Bob Marley. They've done so many of these big figures that they're almost like Disney remakes. They're just running out of recognizable brands.
They need to do an Oscar Wilde. They had an Oscar Wilde in the 1960s who was strangely austere and severe. Then Stephen Fry did his. It was strangely benign and diffident. And then what's his face did one, but in the post-jail section of Wilde's life. They've never landed on Oscar Wilde properly. They need to do it R-rated, have it graphic, and no holds barred about what his life of excess was like in those 2 or 3 years.
He's tricky though, because like so much of that we know about what he sounded like is people saying, "Oh, he was the most terrific wit," but we don't have any recordings, so nobody really knows exactly what he said. I think there's one alleged recording of him, and we're not even sure if it was him. So nobody really knows what he sounded like, what he was really like in conversation. Everyone just knows that everyone around him said he was the best conversationalist they've ever heard. But how do you convey that in a movie if you don't really know what the source material is? You can do really interesting things with his life story, to be sure. It's the characterization. Whether is it Rupert Everett did the most recent one?
Yeah, that's right.
And I think that was the post jail one, and he played him sort of quite dour and semi-defeated, which is fair enough given the circumstances. But I mean, it's one of I'd love to see it done really well. It's really, I think that would be deceptively difficult to do, that one.
Well, Bosie Douglas said that he didn't actually dispense epigrams in conversation. That wasn't really the thing. It was just a kind of bubbling, general, gleeful fun about him. That was the thing.
I think sometimes, like, to make an interesting biopic, what you have to, I think you got to grab something that's not so much about the person, but the thing. Like, it's going to sound like I'm joking, but I genuinely would watch the hell out of this because they did BlackBerry and Tetris, so you can make biopics about sort of
those were great.
things.
Yeah, that's great.
Would watch the shit out of a John Romero biopic, and he's the guy that one of the guys that made Doom, the video game, and it was just like the 90s were this crazy time for games, and it was kind of violent, and there was this, oh my God, it's a murder simulator, and there was all this shit surrounding it, and he was like this celebrity, when kind of an early video game celebrity, right up there with
that's
Wozniak,
right.
and he had a beautiful mane of hair. And then he tried to, it was like this weird downfall story, because his follow-up game was called Daikatana, and he told everybody that it was going to be like a game that would just make you piss yourself. It was so incredible. Like there were these funny posters that it would said, John Romero's going to make you suck it down, and he's going to make you his bitch. Like you can go find these posters that they actually printed, and it didn't deliver. And he's kind of just been in obscurity ever since. And I would watch the shit out of that.
Well, yeah,
Greg,
but
have you read Masters of Doom?
I have not.
You'd fucking love it, man. You got to read it. It's called Masters of Doom by... let me just grab the name of the author here. I can remember the name of the book. I never remember the name of the author. It's basically
my favorite Byron story is that he was annoyed that Cambridge wouldn't allow dogs, and so he turned up with a tame bear instead.
Yeah. Okay, so Masters of Doom, How Two Guys Created an Empire and Transformed Pop Culture, is a 2003 book by David Kushner about video game company id Software and its influence on popular culture. You'd fucking love it, Greg. It goes from the 80s when they're all making games, indie games, sort of cereal box games, and then they get together in the 90s because they were all working at the same shit company as software engineers, and they realized how bad the company was and that they were all being underpaid. Some of the shit with John Cormack's really funny. Like the manager has an argument with him, and John Cormack comes back with something like, "I don't care if you do fire me. This whole company's shit, and I'm going to leave anyway," because he doesn't really have a filter. Some of the stuff with John Cormack's really funny, but that's a great book, and you could take that book and make it into a great movie.
Oh yeah.
I mean, there's the success of something like Tetris. I mean, Tetris is one of my favorite films of, was it last year or the year before that came out?
2022, I think. Yeah, great film.
Great movie.
Was it that early? Damn. Yeah, I mean, it's a great movie, but one of the things that makes that work so well is that it's almost not about Tetris. What it is it's using Tetris as this vehicle for exploring one of the most crazy times in the emerging video game technology and the interplay in Cold War in the United States and the Soviet Union, and like the pitfalls of trying to make art under different regimes. You have these larger than life characters like Robert Maxwell, who they only really sort of touch on, though he's the villain of the piece, but you could do so much more with him. But it's a really, really great excuse for exploring a huge number of fascinating people at a really fascinating time. And Tetris is just it's almost a MacGuffin for the writers. It's just, this is our excuse to set this movie, to tell this story about these people. This is just the locus. It's the one thing, weirdly, that unites everyone, is this weird little video game about blocks that fall on each other.
Well, Julia Garner seems like a good choice.
Bring up the Garner Madonna photo. Echo,
yes, right here.
Down there. No, the other one. There's another one I put in there to make my point.
Yeah,
on the... My point was, it's go below. You got to bring it onto the stage.
Oh, is it this thing over here?
Yeah.
Not good.
Okay. The point I'm making is Madonna was a famous beauty in the 80s, right? Not necessarily a classic beauty, more like a dirty beauty, but still a very beautiful woman. And not to be the bad guy, but I don't think that Julia Garner, she looks like a plank of wood, okay?
Yeah.
She's a plain Jane, and Madonna was smoking hot. Not classically beautiful, but smoking hot, and I don't... That's the brand. That's the brand that really sells the movie, and I don't think that Julia Garner just physically... She's a good actress, but that's the reality. She's just not hot enough to play Madonna.
Well, I'm in the Finding Neverland side of Michael Jackson, so I kind of steer clear of him.
Really?
Yeah.
I think those two guys... I'm not making any statements about Michael Jackson's guilt or lack thereof, but I do think the two guys in that documentary were lying for money. But in any case, Jafar Jackson, has he been in it? Let me actually check. You can give your thoughts on this, guys, while I check.
I thought that was Will Smith's son for half a second.
The one that tweets nonsense and he thinks it's interesting.
Yeah, the one who wore a castle in his head at the interview.
Yeah, I've actually got him as my avatar here. Okay.
Excellent. Well, as pleasurable as this is, I actually have to sort of run. I have an obligation that I have to see to. So we're going to have to shift on like our Star Wars stuff and a few other bits and pieces onto our next stream, which might actually inadvertently have some good consequences. But I'll leave you with that teaser little trailer. I do want to quickly run through some super chats because they're kind of racking up here a little bit. M8566, a member for 5 months. Talk about commitment. We're so back, baby. Yes, we are. And hope you didn't miss us too much. M8566 is so enthralled and excited that he gifted 5 Echo Chamberlain memberships. So go crazy in the chat.
Heck yeah.
Go for broke. Everyone's going berserk and they're trying to snap them up. But look at this Leviathan. Sonny Close, for the massive amount of $50 American dollars, which in New Zealand currency, I can basically start an investment portfolio. You guys are great.
Tomorrow, but enjoy that 50 for now.
Yeah, you guys are great. Well, no, Sonny Close is the real great one in this situation, and appreciate that. A huge amount. They made 566 again for another $5. Who was your favorite robot from Robot Wars, and why is it Razor?
Razor beat Tornado in that final, and I will not hear anybody say otherwise. That was a fix.
Is this a thing from the online internet competition where they have like the there's the zone where the little toy things smash into each other, or do I have that totally confused?
No, it was it was a UK version kind of BattleBots, which is still running in the United States, sort of like combat robotics. So people, it was hilarious in the really early days because it was just people in a shed, and the most in England in particular, the most awkward people imaginable because they're all nerdy engineers and mechanics. And someone thought, hey, let's put them on TV. So they built these little boxes on wheels originally. They turned into amazing things by the end, but then they tried to interview them, and it was funny.
There was a wonderful dichotomy. What was the name of the host, Platoon?
Craig Charles of Robot Wars.
Craig Charles is this explosively charismatic personality, and he was brilliant. And there would be this dichotomy between his really social, fun personality and just these planks of nerdwood.
Yeah,
and it was wonderful to watch.
And in the first season, it was Jeremy Clarkson was the host, and they replaced him because obviously, like, he's not going to take the piss out of these people. Yeah. So if, like, the one team that has a woman on it, and the robot doesn't even get off the start line in a gauntlet as well.
M8566 again, $5. Chaos is my friend with benefits. Kill me.
Yep.
That's a good
actual
slogan.
line
like
in
that.
The Star Trek show.
Oh wow, that's terrible. That's appalling.
People
Brian
don't believe
Brent.
that was real either. Can you? I mean, I just feel like we need to confirm that wasn't made up. That's a real fucking line.
That's crazy stuff. I just need to look at that one more time. Chaos is my friend with benefits. Someone actually wrote that down, and that went through 3 or 4 sets of hands.
And then she danced through garbage, saying chaos, 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 chaos.
Amazing. Brian Bring. Thank goodness I don't have to watch these movies. You guys are more entertaining, so shut up and take my money. Fry from Futurama. Well, absolutely. Good to see you again, Brian, and thanks again for that. And Hemorrhoid Hurts, poor thing, for $5. Jeez, mate, where you been, Echo? Bad live stream withdrawals. I've had to make up with make do with B-Sup and Reaper rants. By the way, I love B-Sup too. Of course you do. Everyone loves B-Sup. Speaking of B-Sup, look, we've got a real star in the chat here. The movie Cynic. Cheers, fellas. Yeah, well, cheers.
What's that wanker doing here?
Yeah.
This is the real looking through the window, seeing what's going on. You got caught, brother.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, so Despot, I'm sorry to cut you short on there, but someone will have my guts for garters if I don't leap away from here in a moment. And we'll do our Star Wars thing next time. But great to have things back up and running. I was so out of touch and had so much ring rust that it was 5 minutes before the thing, and I got, oh shit, I got to send the link. That's right, you've got to do that. But yeah, everyone there. And Platoon, you've been a real trooper staying up till 2:30 in the morning, which is probably normal by your standards.
Oh,
anyway.
It's middle of my work day. I've got loads of stuff to do after this.
All right. Well, with any final thoughts, Greg, from the depths of an American winter, what sort of words of wisdom can you lend to us?
Don't trust your government, kids. There we go. Got it.
There it is. All right. Platoon, from the depths of a totalitarian 1984 state. What words of wisdom before all your encrypted messages get decrypted and then you knock on the door?
If there is hope, it lies with the proles.
Excellent. And Despot, the man coming from the darkness of domestic responsibilities. What can you tell
Yes,
us?
I'm working on a video at the minute about a secret project, but it's going to be quite something when it's finished. But from now on, every time I sign off a stream, I'm going to take inspiration from Cato the Elder. Every time Cato the Elder finished a speech in the Roman Senate, he said, Carthago, hold on, I don't speak Latin, Carthago delenda est, which means Carthage must be destroyed. Every time I finish a stream, I'm going to finish with biopics must die. No matter what the topic is, no matter what we've been talking about, every time I finish, I'm going to say biopics must die. So there you go.
Well, that and Melvin's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood are shit. Those are going to become the two mainstays of every single stream.
But we got one more super.
Do we have one more?
One more.
Oh my God, so much generosity piling in here. And it says, Steel Manning for $5. Don't think, just consume product and get excited for next product. Exactly. Well, we've lost all our excitement for any products, but we'll see as the weekend unfolds. It's going to be all hands to the pumps for us on our channels. In the meantime, I just want to thank Greg Owen, the little Platoon, and Despot of Antrim, and we'll catch you on the flip, as I never actually say in any context in life. So goodbye to everyone.
Bye.
Twitter.
Bye.
Bye.